So suppose one car shows up, what's 30 minutes? Walk that much.
Sign the paper, right?
Okay, well, we can ask him about that. Good, let him stand.
How have you been?
I've been good. Good.
Hi, showing your face and leaving?
Shore house? Is that going to
Good, good, good.
Oh, we're waiting for that, waiting for that, waiting for that.
Yeah, of course. The auditor stuff is set up in there, so.
What is?
The auditor, so just look around it. Okay.
Including roof.
That chair. I don't want anybody sitting in that chair, so let's move it.
You don't buy it. Good to see you.
Oh, okay.
So I've been busy trying to get it in order, you know. New house,
Ready for you by the summer?
no pictures up, no. Garages are totally unorganized, full of compact stuff like that.
You've got plenty of time before you.
Oh yeah.
Are you going to lease it out?
It's just like the old one we tore down. Just for us.
Where is it?
On the bay, at the end of
The one that's gonna
Stephen. Cersei.
I didn't read your text completely. Do you want to reschedule?
Might have seen that one.
Okay.
Construction going on.
We're down by Cersei.
Yeah.
It's right across the street.
Okay. Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. There's construction
Now I
going on.
Yeah,
they were both practically every block.
Somebody's probably on it. No, somebody on here is. I have to mute everyone.
Excuse me.
Well,
Well, we gotta get our stuff going here,
Figure out
huh?
how to pick them up from the airport and their lodging and come in.
Mr. Kingsbury,
Oh yeah, that's why Tristan,
came up last night.
this can't be done through the municipality, you know what I mean? It's just too many private sector, Uber, lodging.
Resolution on the side, we just supposed to get that on.
Oh, okay.
All right. I wouldn't be able to see at the end.
Which is kind of what we're doing. So, these are being built in federal parks, they have to follow procurement laws too. So there's a way to do it.
Hey, how you doing?
Sorry, I didn't see you sneak in. I was looking for you.
Oh, I just quietly tiptoed in.
I'm just going to ignore the audience and do my job. Now, there are no more. I have no more chairs.
They're all out.
They're all out. They could go on there. You could all keep them on. You want to move that table? Does it matter to you? They're huge distance.
And that way, with
One a little higher.
Why don't we move Scott down to Marty so that they have two rooms?
That's all it does.
I mean, I just thought Scott was still on his, getting away from everybody.
Right. Because they think that because it mostly happens when you make a motion, you're trying to advance the board. Maybe
Oh, no, hell no. No, that was only that first 3 months.
This one is the, yes.
Oh, double whammies.
This door?
A lot of adjectives I use.
All right, I need everybody.
Paula? Are you okay over there with it?
I am. Can you make an announcement too for anybody who's online that they have to stay muted?
They have to what?
Stay muted.
I don't-
They
Oh,
have to
okay.
mute themselves.
Let me know when we go.
Whenever you're ready.
We're good? Okay.
3, 4.
Come to order, please. All rise for the flag salute.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a reading of the Sunshine Law, please?
Notice of this meeting was published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, our usual announcement, there will be no new business after 11 p.m. I almost hate to ask a general question, but are we straightened out with regards to Mrs. Tiver? She doesn't have to be sworn in? Or does?
Mrs. Tyndall?
I mean Tyndall, I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's fine.
She's, okay, sorry. May I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Klaus, absent. Mr. McKay,
Present.
Mrs. Kelly,
Here.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Here.
Mr. Chakotay, absent. Mrs. Tyndall,
Here.
Mrs. Baggio, Ms. Costco,
Here.
Mr. Novarita, here. Mr. Bradley,
Here.
Mr. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin, here, and Mr. Krollpfeifer.
Here. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir. Yeah, until we get to the case.
Pardon? Yeah, I'm going to do that. Hiya. Bruce? For the folks who are online, please make sure that you leave the mute button, because it messes up everybody else is on it. Okay, we have on the agenda, for those of you that may have looked at it, we have 3 items for business, and I'm going to take A and C first, and the reason is not to delay you, but they're being pushed off, so I want to just get it out of the way. We have a request from the attorney for R&M Development that they want to continue the application to March 1st. Because of all the continuance, we've made the decision that we're going to dismiss their case with prejudice, and when they, pardon?
Without.
Without prejudice, and big difference. And then they'll have to resubmit. So I need a motion and a second to take action on that.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
Ms. Costco,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and Mr. Krollpfeifer.
Yes. The next case is 735 North Clinton Avenue. Counselor McAndrew has requested it be adjourned to the March 1st meeting. No notice will be required. I need a motion and a second on that.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndale?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes.
And Mr. Krollpfeiffer?
Yes. Okay. Now, we're here for the Beacon of Hope application.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I need to recuse myself.
Yes, okay. For those of you in the public who weren't here the last time, pardon me, Mrs. Gilmore has to recuse herself because she's on the Township Committee, and Mrs. Baggio has to recuse herself because she's a resident of the community that's contiguous to the property involved. And Mr. Bradley, you're in the same situation, right?
Understand.
Okay. Just so everybody knows why people are disappearing, okay? It's not because they don't want to hear this.
Understood.
What's that? Nobody. Okay. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm
Sorry-
well.
Sorry for the short delay.
No worries.
I was going to start off with a little recap, if you don't mind,
By all
of
means.
what took place, because a lot of people are probably
Sure.
here tonight that didn't hear anything.
Sure.
But I was wondering, maybe I'll ask a couple of quick questions, and you can answer them
Okay.
for your applicant. Who owns the entity, the Beacon of Hope?
Who owns the applicant entity?
Yes.
That is Pastor Darlene Trappier.
Okay. And is it a partnership or a corporation?
It is a not-for-profit corporation, sir.
Okay, and that was 501c3?
Correct.
Okay. And they're leaving Mount Holly to come to this location. They're proposing to come to this location, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this isn't an additional facility, it's in lieu of, so to
Correct.
speak. Did we discuss why they're leaving Mount Holly?
I think we did, that it's a space issue. Correct. The fact of the matter is, it's a very small facility in Mount Holly, and they've been very well-received by the community, very successful, if you will, and they need more space to provide the services that they provide.
Okay. And are they planning to service the constituents from Mount Holly at this location?
Correct. They will, for those who can't travel to the Hainesport Township location, if we could be so bold as to suggest that we were to get an approval, if we were to get an approval, for those constituents who could not travel to this facility, Beacon of Hope would provide services, take food and clothing to those individuals who cannot make it here.
Okay, thank you. And I guess, are there any violations in Mount Holly that you know of?
No, I think we are a clean operation, and we have no violations with the municipality.
I mean, you're not being invited out of town is what I'm trying to get at. I don't want to put it in the wrong.
No, thank you for giving us the opportunity to assure you that, no, we are not being invited out of town.
And one last thing from the application, I noticed on page, I was going to ask this last time, but I want to get it out of the way right now. On page 2, it says that the essential services to a growing segment of the community, in other words, the reason that you're proposing this, it's in item 12, page 2. Providing essential services to a growing segment of the community. What is that based upon?
I wrote that, so I'm in a good position to respond to that. What I meant by that is that the need, and we see this, we see this throughout the country, unfortunately, the need never gets less. It always seems to grow, meaning the number of people who need the services that organizations like Beacon of Hope provide. People who are food challenged, who need the services of a food pantry, who need the services of a clothes closet. Those numbers don't drop, they only seem to increase. And
Okay,
again,
no,
that's not specific to Hainesport Township or Burlington County, it's across the country.
Okay. Last couple of questions about the property. Who owns the location now?
It's currently owned by an organization by the name of Brios
Brios.
Limited, yes.
And who are they?
My understanding is that that they are the heirs to the property, family of the art dealer who formerly occupied it.
Okay. And will Beacon of Hope be a tenant, or will they own the property?
They will own the property. We are contract purchasers.
Okay. All right, I think, do you want to go into the usage again in terms of what services are going to be provided and what times, or do you want to do that, or do you want to?
We can certainly do that. Our planner is going to provide that information during his testimony. I can bring
Okay.
the applicant up again earlier if you would prefer.
No, I just wanted to let the people that are listening to or hear get those answers without being repetitious or redundant.
Sure.
Okay, that's it, I think. Does anybody else on the board have?
Mr. Chairman, Council, some of this may have been the subject of testimony at the last hearing. I don't expect you to give testimony, but I'll ask you these questions, and if it was covered, you can recap.
Okay.
And if it wasn't covered, then you can.
We'll make
cover
sure it
with-
gets covered.
With people you. You've been in Mount Holly, when I say you,
The applicant.
the business has been in Mount Holly for how many years approximately?
11.
All right. And do you have any insight into how the police department in Mount Holly considers the work of this Beacon of Hope?
I don't personally, but that's a great question, and I'll make sure that gets covered in testimony tonight.
Same question, but substitute township committee,
Okay?
okay? Next question. What is the service area for Beacon of Hope?
I'll have that testified to as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just one last comment from me, and I'll be quiet for a while, not for long. And I asked this at the last time to the people who are attending this, please do not interrupt the applicant when they are presenting their case. Public comment comes at the end of the introductions of the subject matter, discussions by our professionals and their professionals, and then we have public comment, at which time you'll all be given an opportunity to ask questions to me, make comments to me, but we're not going to get into debates. I guess maybe I misspoke. I shouldn't have said ask questions, because you might not get the answers. You can make a comment, and we'll try to satisfy you if we can. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have one other comment.
yes.
The last time, we had this constant repetition of a growing din in the background, people whispering, talking to one another, and then at the same time saying they can't hear what's going on. So we have to maintain silence so we can hear what was going on, both enabling us to hear the witnesses and you to hear the witnesses. Can't do that if everybody's talking, even in a whisper to one another.
Okay, thank you. You're on.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Erica Edwards, land use and zoning lawyer here in New Jersey, back tonight on behalf of Beacon of Hope, Inc., not-for-profit 501c3 corporation, currently providing a variety of community services, including food pantry, clothes closet, life skills training, and among others, a Code Blue shelter that we discussed the last time we were here, and we'll discuss it again tonight. We are here to talk about Beacon of Hope locating from Mount Holly, as we just discussed, to the property known as 1285 Route 38 here in Hainesport Township. It is in the Highway Commercial District. I neglected to mention the primary use. I was detailing the uses. I did say among others, but the primary use for this facility will be a house of worship. The owner of the organization is a clergy person, Pastor Darlene Trappier, who you met last time, who's sitting right to my left, and you will hear from her again this evening. But the house of worship is the primary use, and the additional accessory uses, I don't say that in a zoning context, but I say that as additional uses, are the food pantry, the clothes closet, the life skills training, and the Code Blue shelter. With that, I'm going to give you a highlight of what our professional testimony will be tonight, our expert testimony. We're going to put our project engineer, our civil engineer, back on briefly to discuss some changes, modifications that have been made to the plans since you saw them last. Or since we were last here to testify. After that, we will bring on a new witness who was not with us last time, Nathan Mosley, who is also an engineer, but he is a traffic engineer with Shropshire and Associates. He has not yet been sworn, of course. We can swear him before we get underway with any testimony, or we can swear him when we bring him up to start his own testimony, whichever you prefer. He will come after the civil engineer, and then after Mr. Mosley, we will put on our architect, Kent Werner, who will provide an overview of the renovations that we're doing to the building. Just by way of introduction to his testimony, we are not doing any new construction there. We are renovating an existing structure. But he will walk you through the floor plan, how we're going to use that existing building, and the renovations that we're going to do there. And then our last professional witness of the evening is Mark Remsa, who is our planning consultant, and he will be discussing the variances that we're seeking from the board, including the D1 use variance, and providing all of the justifications, and in particular talking about the fact that we are an inherently beneficial use under the municipal land use law. So with that, I'd like to put our project engineer on, if that works for you.
Yeah, that'll be fine, because
Okay.
they both were sworn in at the last meeting, and Mr. Mosley, will do him when we get to that point.
Fine.
Okay?
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Good evening.
Hi there.
Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Mark Malinowski again, professional engineer with Stout and Colwell Engineers. Maybe I'll just... talk. Does that help at all? No. Why we're getting reverb. But, we had, since the last meeting, we had, not sure what the problem is, but in any case, since the last meeting, we had made revisions to the plan. One, to address most of the comments, at least from from the board's professionals. Because of the time constraint, we didn't quite get to all of the comments, but we did address a majority of them. And then also, it was, the last meeting, there was a large concern about the parking situation, the number of parking spaces. So what we had done was we actually obtained 4 more parking spaces, and we added those parking spaces to the rear of the site. Actually, this is a new rendering that we developed that shows a new layout, and I believe we're up to A6, but I'm not really sure, so I'll mark it A6. So this is another color rendering of the site plan that's been modified to show, landscaping. We also show some parking in the back and the additional parking. So if you recall, and I'll bring up the old rendering, which is A2, you recall we had the dumpster enclosure at the end of the two-way drive aisle to the east of the building. That was at the end of the aisle. And then what we've done is we've extended the parking in that location, and we relocated the dumpster enclosure to the front of the building. So that did a number of things. One, of course, it allowed for 4 additional parking spaces, but it also improved the circulation with regards to pickup of both the trash and the recycled material, where they can just come into the front loop road, have a head-on approach to the dumpster enclosure, of course, pick up the trash and recyclables, and then they can just back up a little bit and then exit out of the second drive. So with that, again, we had the additional parking spaces. What we show on this rendering is where if the, one of the things, of course, is when they distribute the food and clothing on Fridays, if there's there was a concern before about the number of parking spaces. Again, the traffic engineer had done a parking study at their existing facility, and he'll provide testimony on the number of cars that we're utilizing during that time, we're visiting during that time. However, to maximize the number of spaces, what we showed is that the employees can park in the back, and most of them can have parking spaces with the exception of 2 cars, which will be tucked up in the rear of the site. Additionally, there was testimony before that the applicant has a company truck, and that truck can park in front of the proposed shed at the rear of the location. So in addition to that, we added some additional lighting to illuminate the expansion of the parking in the rear. We've improved the landscaping along the easterly side. We adjusted some of the foundation plantings along the main portion of the building. We provided some landscaping around the dumpster enclosure that's in the front. And then we've also located, there's a large evergreen tree in the front. It's existing. We located that, and we show that on the plan also. So we did a lot of cleanup to address the professionals' letters. They did issue new letters. We don't have, there's a few other comments that we have to address, and we don't really have any problem with addressing those. One of the other items that was brought up was doing a letter of interpretation, so we've started that process, and we'll be applying to DEP for that relatively soon. So that's a brief overview of the changes that are made to the site. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Mr. Malinowski, we're looking at a plan, and where is the property line for 4 sides?
The property line, if you can see, it's this red line.
Okay.
that-
So it
on
doesn't
the
extend
rendering.
to the wooded area.
It does extend a little bit into the wooded area, correct?
And you're seeking a letter of interpretation from
NJDEP,
the GEP?
yes.
And where is your thought in doing so as to where the potential wetlands could be?
Well, there's potential wetlands along this drainage corridor in here. It is off the site. And then there's also, actually, the adjoining property has a detention basin that appears to control the runoff from their parking lot in the rear here. So, of course, their basin is wetland area. And then there's some swell in the wooded area in the back also that's wetlands.
Okay. Do you know who the owner of that property is? The adjacent
The-
woods barrier?
The actual owner? No, I do not. Yeah.
So let me talk to you about paved areas and parking. As one member of this board who's seen a lot of applications over a lot of years, featuring dumpsters in the front yard would not be high on my list of good design decisions. What do you think?
Well, in this particular situation, we're trying to maximize the amount of parking with the space that we have. Typically, they are not put in the front yard, but what we've done is, it's not really in view. We've provided landscaping around it. So your planner had indicated to make it made out of the precast block type of split face block. So we can do that where we were proposing to do it in just a vinyl fence. But to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing, we can do the split face block with that. So
What is the intended use for all the green, I'll call it grass area, to the rear of the building?
It's just lawn area. The applicant could provide an additional testimony to that. I think it's just open space.
And what was the perceived purpose for fencing the area? Your current plan shows a beige, solid vinyl, I think, fencing around 3.5 sides.
That's correct. There is a fence starting, if we start on the western side, ties into the bi-level building and then goes along the wood line to the rear and then out along the front parking. It's got a dual-purpose one, so pretty much secure the area a little bit, although there's an opening here, of course, where on the eastern side where the parking spaces are. And then also on the eastern side to provide additional buffer because, as we indicated before, our parking lot does not comply with the setback to the property line. It's 4-foot setback where 20 is required, so we provided, it provides a screen in that area.
What do you know about the ownership of the lot immediately to the east, which looks to me to be street-like, long, narrow lot? The space between your facility and the adjacent facility.
Let's see.
I think that wouldn't that be the Legacy Building?
That is correct.
Right.
It's a legacy
I
building.
didn't Legacy building, yeah, it's, the space between it seems to be, or look like a vacated road, actually.
I think at one point, a portion of it was vacated on both properties. When you do a vacation, usually split it, correct, I believe at one time there was a vacation, but it's no longer a road, and of course, it's been improved over the years.
Right.
That is correct.
You don't know anything about the ownership of that strip, whether Legacy owns it or third party owns it. Certainly you don't own it. Your client doesn't own it.
No, not at the moment, no. No, the current property owner would own it, and the portion that's been vacated, and then, of course, Legacy would own the other portion that's been vacated.
All right, so you don't have any really information about that possibly vacated street. All right, so let's move on.
Other than it's been vacated, yeah, the road does not exist anymore, correct.
So let me get back to the number of parking slots. You're now providing 29 spots.
That is correct.
For purposes of dealing with the number of spots, and to be specific, increasing the number of spots, and to deal with the relocation of the dumpster. Why haven't you considered extending the pavement behind the building in the area where you now have the red shed?
Back in this area?
Exactly.
What it does is, it doesn't really provide much more benefit. It gets kind of narrow in here. So, I mean, that could be accomplished, but, or may be able to be accomplished, but that's primarily the reason.
Well, how many spots do you need to conform?
Well, if
At
we,
29, what's your target? If you try to make it conform?
well, the way the ordinance reads is, when you take all the uses and you add them all up, that would be the requirement. That's the way the ordinance reads. But the way this facility operates, the various uses don't necessarily occur at the same time. So that's why.
We understand that.
Yeah.
So give me a target.
Actually, I did not add all the parking spaces up that would be required for each individual use if they all occurred at the same time.
It does.
That would be the total. So that would be hard to accomplish
Excuse me.
all that.
For purposes of the folks that didn't hear that response from Mr. McLaughlin, who's an alternate on the board and can participate in this portion of it, do you want to just repeat it, or you want me to just say, you made reference to Scott Taylor's letter?
44.
And I think we need to get clarification, because I believe the site plans actually called out a requirement of 47 spaces, so that's why we've asked for a clarification on all of those calculations, so the board can accurately understand what the requested relief actually is.
Well, while we're on the subject of parking, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but I figure we're on it right now. What are these 9 valet parking spaces that we're talking about?
Yeah, we had indicated that previously, based on, based on the summation of some of the uses, but then we later found out that they don't occur at the same time. So the valet parking was for operations like primarily during the Code Blue and the people on site, the employees on site during the service hours, but those people aren't on site during the service hours, as testimony had provided. So in that regards, we were short those spaces. So previously we showed how we could provide valet parking should the need exceed the use. So, and that can still be done, but we don't feel that it's necessary now at this point. And again, we have the traffic engineer to explain what their findings were and the various uses and how we feel that the parking we provided exceeds the needs of the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Malinowski, let me finish up. So if we were to look to gain additional parking, you know of any engineering reason why some of that green grass area behind the building could not be used for parking, paved if necessary?
No, I do not,
And-
from an engineering point.
And the dumpster could be located, if you did that, the dumpster could be relocated to the upper right corner to be serviced by a truck, correct?
Yes, it could. There was, again, concern that the truck operating when people are parking in that area, so it was the location now that we show also addressed the maneuverability of that refuse truck.
But we all know
So-
that private refuse trucks can be scheduled.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, we do.
And then the red shed, as I'm calling it, that red rectangle.
Yes.
Chart. That's needed for what purpose?
For just maintenance equipment, that's my understanding, correct? Yes.
Lawnmower, et cetera.
Yes, correct.
And is there any reason that that could not be relocated if part of the green grass area were used for additional parking?
Right, there is no reason it couldn't be relocated.
All right. Am I to understand there is no significant paved parking areas on the site at present? It's mostly just a dirt road to the back of the property.
Pretty much looking at like historical aerials, there's a lot of gravel. Of course, the entrance drives, they're paved currently. There's a stone area here. It looks like the stone area was brought up along a portion of the eastern side of the building. And then there was stone, and maybe a little more stone that's been overgrown. The vegetation has grown on top of over the years in the front of the building. Yeah.
And the runoff from the proposed new paving, which is shown on the diagram you're working on, is that proposed to run south to Route 38?
It is, no, it does all run to the corridor. Currently, the drainage, the way the drainage works is it kind of splits, and from the east, it comes over, and then part of it's pretty much halfway. Part of it splits to the north and then continues on to the east. I'm sorry, to the west, rather. And then part of it, again, comes south and along the front of the building and goes toward the west, and it all just drains through swales to the drainage corridor to the western side of the property.
All right, so if paving was added to the grass area, you'd expect the drainage to run to the west, basically?
All the drainage, everything will be the same as it is now. It would be all draining toward the west, to that drainage corridor. Yes.
All right, so this is a question that can be posed, I don't want Mr. Malinowski to answer it because I expect he can't, but to the applicant's witnesses, if additional parking is appropriate or needed, why can't it come from the grass area behind the building? To put it another way, why can't the paved area be expanded to take care of that and also take care of what I, as one member, perceive to be the inappropriate placement of the garbage bins in the front yard?
Yeah, and basically one of the reasons is, one, we, trying to keep as much open space as possible to reduce the drainage going to the corridor. The other thing is, of course, the wooded area here, it would probably require some removal of existing vegetation to expand, and then it does get tight along the rear property line here. Right now, because you'll have if you have parking along here, you need a drive aisle to accommodate that, and then that'll get awfully close to the property line. So there would be some grading issues from an engineering standpoint. There'd be additional clearing of vegetation, so that we wanted to minimize that. And since this proposed use doesn't need all those parking spaces, we wanted to minimize the impact on the surrounding area.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does any of your maps delineate the wetlands?
Not has been submitted, no, not yet.
So, is it possible that there's wetlands back there behind that building prohibiting paving?
There could be, but not that I'm aware of at this point.
It's pretty wet actually, right?
Yeah, we do know that, of course, we talked about that basin on the adjoining property, and they do drain into this area, so it's very possible.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just one point of clarification. In reviewing the plans, the new location of that trash enclosure will require a variance to allow an accessory structure within a front yard. So I would assume that the applicants would amend the application to include that. I apologize, it was overlooked in our report. We did note the location in the front yard and raised some concerns about the aesthetics. They are not permitted in those front yards. just to follow up on Mr. McKay's concerns and comments.
Okay, thank you.
They're not permitted anywhere in the town. You know, the
trash-
trash containers shouldn't be parked out front of your house.
Right, but I'm saying a dumpster enclosure on commercial uses are permitted inside and rear yards.
Sure.
But a trash enclosure is not permitted within a front yard, so that would be a variance.
Or they have to move it.
Or they'd have to move it, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, continue, or
If there are any other questions?
any board questions or professionals?
Question,
Mr.
you may have
Murphy?
addressed this a month ago, but the worship services, the primary use of the property is for worship services. On Wednesday nights, I understand this.
Mr. Murphy, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Can you, use the microphone?
Apologize, sorry. You may have addressed this last meeting a month ago, but I did have a question about the worship services, not only Sundays, but on Wednesday nights, from 7 o'clock to 8:30. I couldn't help but think on the drive over tonight, when it's very dark, during these months, the people that are coming for the worship services, especially on a Wednesday night, how are they getting to the property? I thought I heard last time that there might be buses involved, so not everyone's driving their cars here. Would those buses be coming to the property itself or stopping at the Wawa? I'm just worried about foot traffic back and forth on Route 38 during evening hours.
The Sunday morning worship services.
Excuse me, just, you want to introduce yourself
Oh, I'm
to the
sorry.
audience? I mean, we remember you, Mrs. Trappier.
I'm Pastor Darlene Trappier. I'm the owner and executive director of Beacon of Hope. It's nice to meet you guys. The church services on Sundays, we have those from 11 to 1. And then Wednesday night is a Bible study. It's not a formal church service. So it's usually just a few church members that come on a Wednesday night, maybe 4 or 5 individuals come on Wednesday nights for Bible study. There is no formal, like a Sunday morning service on Wednesday nights, and that's from 7 to 8:30.
Okay. It just, as long as we're talking about the same subject, again, people coming and going from the facility, whether it's on Sunday or on, I believe, the food services or on Fridays, again, how are the bulk of the people, most people, coming and going from the property?
In cars,
In cars.
yes.
I just wanted to know what was happening in Mount Holly right now, and the same thing is going to be happening here. Cars are going to be coming mostly, not buses.
No,
and
not buses.
And not a lot of foot traffic.
No, not a lot of foot traffic. Most of the foot traffic are those that are, live in Mount Holly, and we will be supplying their food to them in Mount Holly because they can't make it here. But those that have transportation to make it to Hainesport are the ones that will be able to come to Hainesport, as well as the residents who come, that live in Hainesport, that come visit us in Mount Holly.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes.
Will you be delivering to their residents, or will there be a central location in Mount Holly where you'll be taking it to?
There will be a central location that we'll be taking it to.
Do you have a shared service agreement, or are you retaining any of your existing property for that, or are you going to utilize like another NPO's property or another facility for that central location?
We will be working with Father Andrew from St. Andrew's Episcopal Church.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had one question also. For a Sunday morning, how many people attend the church service on Sunday morning?
About 30 to 35.
Okay.
And that consists of families, not 30 individuals that
Okay.
come separately.
So the only thing that I would say, I mean, I understand with the amount that, to make you be conformed to our policy, but do you have anything in place? Because now you're going to be a highway frontage and you're a church, and there's going to be people that could possibly be looking for a church. So do you have any plans for what happens if like, let's just say we grant 29 spots, but then you get more people that are starting to come to church because of where your location is. So what's the plan for parking for those people then? Do you have a plan?
We would probably be looking at expanding the parking lot if possible. Oh, it's not expandable. It's going to be tight, but
Just to follow up, so for the worship service, your code requires one space for every 3 seats. So right now, so the testimony was they have 30 to 35 people, so you have 35 seats, so that's 11 parking spaces required. So we have 29. So there, by your code, the congregation could almost triple in size and still have the parking that would still meet your code requirement during service hours. So just a bit of information on that with regards to parking for the worship service. So if the congregation did expand, there would be adequate parking for that particular time period during Sundays, during the worship services.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the Friday food pickup. The Friday, do the people that need food, I want to come and get food. So I park and then do I go in the building and get the food? Is that how that works?
no, since COVID, we stopped allowing people to come in. We'll be delivering directly to their cars. We have rollers with big bins where we have the dry foods, everything is bagged and ready to go. So we have the dry goods bag, the meats bag, the pastries bag, the dairy bag. So as people are pulling in, we'll have 4 people in line. I'll be the first one, I'll put the dry food in, I go to the next car, the person comes behind me with the meat, puts it in that car, go to the next car, and that's how we do. So by the time we get to the fifth car, the first car is pulling out. By the time we get to the 6th car, the second car is pulling out, and they're able to take in, new cars are able to pull into their spot. So we come back around and do the same thing until we're done.
And as you're filling the 6th car, somebody else is coming in. And how are you not being hit by that car?
Because they'll be behind us. We'll be moving forward, so all the cars that are leaving will be behind us, and we'll be heading this way. And the cars that are leaving will be leaving behind us, and other cars will be filling in. So by the time we get down to the end, they've all filled up, and we're going back around and doing the same cycle all over again, and everybody is leaving. There are maybe 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Pastor, on that same point, if you just assume that every delivery to the car is 1 unit, what's the current number of units that you basically deliver to cars in Mount Holly presently?
They stagger, you talk throughout the whole day, or at one point of time?
I'm going to ask you both ways.
At peak time, maybe, let's see, we have a mixture of people on foot and people in cars. If you're talking about cars, at peak time, maybe 15 cars.
So 15 units delivered.
Yes.
And then for the whole day, how many units?
Probably maybe 50 cars.
50 units.
Yes.
Okay. And what day of the week is it? Wednesday is food?
Fridays.
Friday's food pantry days.
Yes.
Okay. And the day is from, what are the hours?
On Fridays, it's 9 until 1.
Okay. 50 units from 9 to 1.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And do you find that when you open it, say at 9 o'clock, that's your peak time, that there's a lot of people there then? Or does it pretty much even itself out through those hours?
It evens itself out through those hours.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so scaling this, which we do this kind of work for a living, if somebody pulled in with their car and drove all the way around and they were just about at the exit, it appeared that you're only gonna get 6 cars in here. Is there somebody gonna be directing traffic to keep all these cars from piling up out on Route 38? And I'm not assuming anything, but I would, if I had to, I would guess that somebody's gonna pull sort of to the middle, and not necessarily all the way up to the exit. But you only have room for 6 cars before they're out on 38, the way this looks.
If, the way we see the traffic occurring is that people pulling in, these 8 spaces will be visible right away. If they're open, they would pull into those spaces. If they're full, then the people will travel on the east side of the building and find a parking space there.
So your testimony is that you feel people are gonna pull in the space.
Correct. And park in the space.
Food to come rushing.
No, we're not forming a queue in order to serve, in order to deliver the food and the clothing. They do pull into the parking spaces, and that's when, the food and the clothing is dispersed.
No other activities taking place
That is correct. That is correct. Yes.
I'm a little confused about this now. I thought I had it down, but I thought they were coming in one line past the food pantry, and you're going to deliver the packages to the people when they just pull out. Now you're saying they're going to go park first? If you could just clarify it, okay? Yeah, Pastor?
All right. Can I just use an example so you can see? Okay, this would be the first spot closest to the street. So a car would pull in here, a car would pull in here, here, all the way down. Soon as we see the first car, after the cars line up, we start with the first car, which is closest to the street. They'll receive all of their food. They immediately leave. They go out the exit. We fill up the second car. They immediately leave. We're still moving. They leave. So they'll be constantly moving behind us. And by the time we get to the end, when this person leaves, we have staff that's out there with cones and controlling the flow of traffic. So they will be able to replace this car, this car, this car, and this car, and that gives us the opportunity to come back around and start with this car again so that they can leave. So it's kind of like an assembly line.
So they're not actually parking in a parking space and the food being brought to their car in the parking space?
Yes, they will be pulling into the parking
They
spot.
are. They're going to be parallel parking. It's not going to be a line of cars.
Right.
Okay, that's where I was.
Well, no, we don't have, there's no parallel parking proposed.
It's 50 cars in 4 hours. It's less, 10 cars an hour.
Can I suggest, we do have a traffic engineer here tonight, can I suggest that we have the traffic engineer testify about
Okay.
the traffic circulation, then we can always come back to the applicant with additional.
Yeah, I think that logistics is important. And maybe a question for Pastor. You had mentioned that you guys are serving about 50 cars now in kind of a curbside pickup. What is the total number of meals or folks that you're serving on a Friday?
With adults and children, because we count them as families.
Yeah, I'm just saying sort of groups. How many kind of units, family units of?
We give out maybe 100 to 120, but if it's a larger family, they're going to get double. But if you're counting 100 units, like 100 bags that we give out, it could be, out of that 120, one family could get 2 or 3 sets of food, depends upon their family size.
So the total number of families
That's about 80.
is going to be about 80.
Yeah, if you include foot traffic.
All right. So with the folks who are foot traffic now, because I think last month you were saying it's about 60% foot traffic now
Yes,
and 40% in cars.
yes.
If, knowing that this is not a particularly pedestrian-friendly, accessible site, how are those folks going to be getting here, or is the number going to go from 40% in cars up to 90% in cars?
The majority of the traffic that will come to Hayesport will be about 90% in cars.
So if we do 90% in cars and we were looking at 80, then that number of 50 cars is really now 75 cars?
No. It would still be the same 50 cars.
We're delivering to Mount Holly. We're taking a bunch of meals for a number of families. We're driving it to them back to Mount Holly. So we're not increasing our traffic.
The traffic will actually reduce because we're taking away the foot traffic, because we'll be delivering to them. We have a truck where we would load up all of their meals, take it to them in Mount Holly on Thursdays, so they will have no need to come out to Hayesport on Fridays.
Okay, so then you're looking at 50 or 60 cars somewhere in there.
No more than 50 cars, but not all at the same time. They're staggered throughout the day.
Right, and so it would be 50 cars plus the deliveries.
And deliveries will be done on a different day on Thursdays.
Hey, excuse me, I don't mean to be picky, but you just said they're going to be delivering throughout the day? I thought it was 9 to 1.
No, well, that's our distribution day on Friday is 9 to 1. On Thursdays, those that are foot trafficked, we will be taking all of their food to Mount Holly on Thursday.
Okay.
So they don't even have to come to Hayesport on Friday. The cars that currently come to us in Mount Holly will be the same cars that will come to Hayesport. So it actually reduces the amount of individuals that we provide on Fridays.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just want to also, there was discussion, there was a question about expanding the parking lot in the back, and I was looking at the rendering, and I noticed that we do have a 50-foot distance between the building and the rear property line. And of course, you're parking, if we extend parking along the back here, it takes about 43 feet of the parking area, so you don't have much. You want to have a little separation between the parking and the building, and then also between the property line, so it's really tight, and it might be problematic from an engineering standpoint. And again, we'll be clearing right up to the rear property line. So I just wanted to add that with regards to the impact that some additional parking in the rear would have, on that rear yard.
Don't take my comments to suggest that you should limit it to the rear yard, because you've got a big side yard, too.
Side yard in this area?
Of course.
Again, you'll need to get access back there. The access, the circulation, and I'll defer that to the applicant's traffic engineer, but it really complicates the circulation on the site.
We'll talk to the traffic.
It's very tight.
So it's really that dead-end parking that's creating the problem.
Correct. As far as circulation point, yeah. And what's really creating the problem is just the existing conditions of the property, the location of the building itself and all. So,
Refresh my recollection, Mr. Malinowski, what's the acreage on this property?
let's see. Yeah, it's just under an acre, yeah,
Just under an acre?
yeah.
The whole
Like
property?
I said, about .89.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Has there been any communication with Legacy on the eastern side? In terms of their parking, their facilities, shared? Has there been any communication with Legacy at all?
I believe we have tried to reach out to them, and we have not heard back from them.
Counselor, we talk about Legacy, but for the record, what's your understanding of the services that Legacy provides, if you have an understanding?
I don't have detail about the kind of services that they provide. They provide, I understand, a variety of supportive services, but honestly, sir, I don't have the details.
Does your client know, possibly?
Yes.
We actually work with Legacy. Legacy is a treatment center, an outpatient treatment center for those who are dealing with substance abuse, mental issues. And we provide emergency placement, motel placements, and other wraparound services for them.
And what, to the extent you know, have firsthand knowledge, not speculation, what does Legacy do right at that building? Do they just do counseling in and out?
They do outpatient services, they do coaching, they do emotional support, they do home health care, they do a host of services for their clients over there.
So their clients come to that building?
Yes. Some by foot, some in cars.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Scott, really back to the parking. Scott, do you have a fractional amount of the impervious coverage of this site as designed? Does the applicant have to have that answer? And I'm just wondering if, is there a variance being asked?
There is not.
Impervious coverage now?
No, we fall within the requirements. I'm sorry.
You're under the requirement?
That's correct.
So if you did expand the park, it would probably be over. And then we'd have a drainage issue.
Stormwater.
Also, with possible underground tanks, no?
And I think that may be part of the concern, the runoff and the impervious, to provide that extra parking would create the issue. So I think.
Correct.
And I don't know if Mr. Mosley's going to do that or Mr. Malinowski, but I know one of the things that we had kind of talked about is that clarification of what is the peak. And we know if we have 15 cars of folks who are coming in to pick up, we still have other operations and other employees on staff. And I don't know if that's all reflected in the parking analysis. So I think it'll be important to get all of those things clarified, because I'm not clear, you know, that, obviously the parking is a major issue.
Absolutely.
I think you guys recognize that parking is a major issue. The fact that the valet or stacked parking was previously proposed, I think this really becomes, you know, sort of that critical thing. And this is a site where there is no safety valve. We have a state highway right there, and if it doesn't work and it's not safe, we have a much bigger issue that if somebody gets injured or worse out there. So I think I'm not crystal clear on exactly what all of those numbers are, and I think for the board to be able to act on this appropriately and look at some of those potential negative impacts, we need to have a real grip on that maximum parking demand.
Understood, and that's why we brought a traffic engineer on board. So our traffic engineer is going to speak to the technical details, and our planner is also going to speak to, during his testimony, to the uses and how they interrelate and why we believe we in fact don't need additional parking. I think it'll be clearer once the traffic engineer testifies and then ultimately when all of our professional testimony is in. Having said that, if after we have all of our professional testimony in, the board is still inclined to think that there may be a need for additional parking, we can talk about that. Obviously, we're not saying we're not willing to talk about it. We just think we want you to hear from other professional witnesses before we draw any conclusions about needing more parking.
So you're politely asking us to hold off discussion on parking till you're...
I'm just respectfully suggesting
Okay. No, I
that
think it's a
we
good idea.
hear from more professional, again, we brought a traffic engineer for just this reason,
Okay,
okay?
good.
Okay. Shall I introduce Mr. Mosley? Okay.
Mr. Malikowski, finish?
If there's no further questions, yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay, all right. Mr. Malinowski's not going anywhere, so if we have follow-up questions for him, that's, certainly we can do that. Okay, so Mr. Mosley, Nathan Mosley, PE with Shropshire and Associates, say that 10 times. We need to swear, Mr.
You swear or affirm the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do.
Mr. Mosley, would you please provide your educational and professional background for the board, please?
Sure. So my name is Nathan Mosley, M-O-S-L-E-Y. I'm a licensed professional engineer here in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a certified municipal engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Drexel University. I'm a graduate of Rancocas Valley Regional High School as well. I grew up in this area. I've been in Burlington County for most of my entire life. I now reside over in Marlton, but I grew up in the Mount Holly area. I am a senior project manager and partner with the company Shropshire Associates. I've been there for now over 20 years doing traffic engineering work throughout the state of New Jersey. I've been qualified as an expert in transportation before hundreds of other planning and zoning boards throughout the state, although I've actually never been before Hainesport before, so this is my first time here.
We offer Mr. Mosley as a...
Thank you. Any questions from board members? If not, it's acceptable.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Sure. So I will just try and give a brief summary of some of the traffic issues that I looked at relative to the parking study, relative to the site plan, the circulation, and things like that. And then obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So we did a parking analysis that was submitted with this application. It was dated January 19th, 2023. And basically what we did in that report was we looked at the various types of uses that are going to go on at this facility. Obviously, the primary use is the house of worship, and that's, I think, already been discussed between the previous meeting and tonight. But there are some other additional uses and things that will be occurring at the site throughout the week. And I just wanted to talk about those. Before I get into that real quickly, I just did want to highlight a couple things. This is what traffic engineers do when we start our presentations. But again, the site's on Route 38. It's a state highway under the jurisdiction of the New Jersey Department of Transportation. The existing property, as it sits today, has these two driveways that you see on the plan before you. Those are existing access points that were approved for the previous use. We have received approval from the New Jersey Department of Transportation for the proposed house of worship on this site with these existing driveways. We received that approval towards the end of September, and we can provide a copy of that to your professionals and to the board as well. But NJDOT has reviewed this change in use, this proposed redevelopment, and they have issued a letter indicating that no further driveway permitting is required and that the applicant or the property owner for this use can use the existing driveways as they are today. Obviously, we're doing improvements on site, but as far as the access points on Route 38 are concerned, the DOT has given their approval for the use of those driveways for this proposed development.
Did the state also, as part of their approval, require the directional arrows, or is that something that you simply added as a matter of good sense?
Yeah, that's, I think, more just been added to delineate the fact that it's an inbound and outbound only driveway, just for the purpose of the plan. I'm not sure if those are proposed pavement markings. They are proposed pavement markings, okay. So that will be delineated on the site, just to reinforce the directionality of those existing driveways in the future.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine, no problem. So again, we did a report that was submitted, and there's basically 5 uses that are going to be on this site. You're going to have the house of worship, which will primarily be used on Sunday mornings. They will also obviously be there on Wednesday evenings, as you've heard some testimony already from the applicant as well. You have a fellowship hall that will be used primarily on Sunday afternoons and on Saturdays potentially as well for certain events at the church. Then you also have just the day-to-day operations where there'll be some staff on site doing different things as well. Then you have the food pantry, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, but you've heard a lot about that already. That's on Fridays from 9 a.m. to about 1 p.m. Again, not at the same time as the house of worship or the fellowship hall. Then you have what they call life skill classes, I believe, or like Bible study type classes. Those typically will be happening on Monday and Wednesday mornings. So again, not on Friday mornings when the food pantry is happening, but typically on a Monday or a Wednesday morning. Not in the evenings when services are happening at the church on Wednesdays, not on Sunday mornings when services are happening, but again, just Mondays and Wednesdays. And then the other service they provide, from discussing with the applicant, is they also provide for a warming center or a shelter when there's a code blue in effect for the county, and that's overnight. So that'd be from like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So again, that would be at a time when nothing else is occurring at the site. So there would be, perhaps people that come to the site to stay overnight. When the temperatures are low enough, they open up the shelter and that service is provided to them. But that again would be overnight and not at the same time as anything else. So really the 5 primary uses really are kind of independent from each other from a traffic perspective. They're scheduled that way. That's the way they operate. You see this at a lot of other churches throughout the county. A lot of churches, some churches provide daycare services. Some have, elementary schools. Some have, evening classes that maybe meet during the week. Some host, recreational activities on the weekends for the community, things like that. But churches in general typically offer a lot of different amenities at their facilities, depending on the size of the facility and what they have. So obviously, they're doing that here for this use, and that's common, and that's not kind of an unusual thing to see for a church facility.
Mr. Mosley, just if either you can answer it or you can defer to Pastor Treppier.
Sure.
But I understand the overnight for the Code Blue will start at approximately 7 p.m., end at 7 a.m., and it's when the temperature drops below freezing, 32 degrees, or the wind chill factor, 25. What do you do at 7:30 in the morning when it's still below 25 wind chill factor? Just put them out in the street?
That I would defer to the pastor. I don't know
Okay.
how that works.
Well, I'm basically, if you want to hold off on answering it now, but I won't forget to ask it again.
Yeah, we can.
I want to know where these people expect it to go.
Sure.
You want to answer it later? All right.
The state requires us to house them for 12 hours for the overnight shelters. In the morning, we have the libraries, we have the Dunkin' Donuts, we have the McDonald's, we have the Wawa's. They work with the county to allow individuals and the emergency rooms at the hospitals to allow individuals to come there to warm up and to get themselves prepared to go out and do whatever it is. A lot of them work. So when they leave the shelter in the morning, they go to work. And those that do not work will go to one of the other specified sites that the county works with us.
Okay, thank you.
And many of them have cars, so they get them, and they'll group together in cars, and they end up going to the other places.
Okay, thank you very much.
So going back to the parking, you heard from Mr. Taylor. Basically, when you look at a site, as far as the parking demands, you want to look at the various uses that are being provided on that site, whether it's commercial or residential or an institutional or an office building, whatever it may be, and you look to the zoning ordinance of that local township and you determine the amount of parking required. So obviously here we have several different things occurring on the property, however, not at the exact same time as everything else. But when you have cumulative uses, you typically take the cumulative parking requirements, and that's how you determine the parking.
Excuse me, can we just have one meeting going on here tonight, please? Mr. McKay asked for quiet in the back, so we're having difficulty hearing Mr. Mosley, and it also has to be recorded, and it's interfering with the recording. So could you keep the conversations down, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Mosley.
Sure. So in the case of this project and this property here, the parking requirement based on your ordinance would be 44 parking spaces. We're proposing 29 parking spaces, and the question is that enough parking for what's going to be done? So we obviously can look at the parking needs for each individual use. The food pantry operation is kind of the unknown. There's no real parking requirement for that within the ordinance, and obviously we wanted to look and see what the actual parking needs were for that. So in order to do that, we went out to the existing operations where they are in Mount Holly today. We were out there on Friday, January the 13th. We were out there from 9 a.m. till about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And we basically sat out there and we just watched the parking that occurred. We watched the people as they arrived and departed. And we counted the cars that were parking either on the street in front of the facility in Mount Holly, across the street in the public parking lot. There were even a couple vehicles associated with the operations of the facility that were parked behind that we included in our parking counts just to be as conservative as possible. But we made sure that we counted any parked vehicles or any cars that arrived or departed associated with that use, basically on Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And what we found was that the peak parking that we saw, which included the staff truck that was parked behind the facility, and I believe there was actually 2 of those, and any parking on the street and across the street in the public lot was 15 vehicles at any one time. So the maximum that we saw was at 15, and that typically occurred earlier in the day, and as the day went on, the numbers got a little bit lower. I think around 11 o'clock or 11:30, there was a slight increase up to 11 vehicles at one time, but then it kind of tapered back off to about 4 vehicles by the end of the day. So again, we wanted to study that to make sure that obviously we have enough parking here. And you've heard a lot of testimony about how this facility is going to operate, how they're not going to have the walk-up traffic. It's really just going to be the people that can drive there. It's not going to be people that walk there. We didn't obviously count for anybody who walked to the Mount Holly site. We only accounted for the people that drove their vehicles to that facility today. So I think that, if we say worst case, there's going to be 15 vehicles here at any time for the pantry facility, then I think that's just being as conservative as possible. So when I did the parking analysis, I looked at everything. I looked at the various times that the operations are going to occur. Obviously, during the day, there's going to be a pastor on staff who's going to be there. She'll have a vehicle there. There may be some other people working the facility or helping out that may have a vehicle or two there. We accounted for all of that, and what we found was that the peak parking demand for this site is estimated to be 24 vehicles. And that would be worst case peak time, and that would be on a Friday when the food pantry is operational, because you'll have the food pantry occurring, and you'll have just general staff there as well, working in the facility, helping out, whatever it may be. Worst case, 24 vehicles. In my opinion, probably some of those vehicles we accounted for when we did our parking counts anyway, so some of those staff vehicles may be within that 15. But let's just say there's 15 vehicles for people coming to the food pantry, and then there's an additional 7 or 9 vehicles for the staff that are there, including the pastor. Then we say 24 vehicles, worst case, would be there. And again, we have 29 spaces proposed, and therefore it's in my opinion that the proposed parking of 29 spaces can accommodate the needs of this facility throughout the entire week. Again, and that's based on the studies that we've done, and that's based on the fact that really the things that happen at the facility are all going to be at separate times between the worship services, the fellowship hall operations, the food pantry, the Code Blue if it does occur overnight, and then just the Bible studies in the mornings on Mondays and Wednesdays. Those all happen at different times, and therefore, yes, you would want to cumulatively add up the parking, but in reality, that's not what's going to happen. It's all going to be kind of complementary to each other, and kind of reduces the peak demand or the peak need for this site, and I believe that the 29 spaces will be able to accommodate that parking demand for this future facility. So that's really the extent of the letter that I put together. I've been out to the site several times. I've driven by this place so many times I can't even count. But again, I've looked at the on-site circulation as well relative to the parking. I believe that the design that Mr. Malinowski has put together is a good design. It does provide for safe and efficient access. It does provide for the ability to access the various parking spaces, and I do believe it's a good design from an engineering perspective.
So let me ask you this, Mr.
Mosley.
Mosley. Pardon. What if you were to relocate the trash facility to the back? How do you, as a traffic engineer, reconfigure the parking back by that red shed in the corner to accommodate that and still maintain your 29 parking spots?
Yeah, so I'll just speak to it as a traffic engineer. I don't do site layouts. I see a lot of them, but I don't do the full designs, which include all the stormwater and everything else. Personally, from a traffic engineering perspective, site circulation, I think there's a great benefit to having the traffic area up in the front of this building, given the layout of this property, given the existing buildings that are there today, and just given the size of the lot. To have a trash truck have to circulate all the way to the rear, pick up, whether it's front-loaded or rear-loaded, whatever it may be, and then try to turn around and come back out, that's a lot of maneuvers for a trash truck. I think given the location up here in the front, being able to just come straight forward, front load, whatever it may be, and then just pull back out onto Route 38, that's an ideal circulation for that trash pickup. So,
assume that's not possible. What would you then do?
then I guess you would, look at something back here in the rear that would accommodate the trash parking. You maybe would lose a space or two. Again, I think they still have more than enough parking, even if it were 28 or 27 spaces.
You're deferring to the engineer.
Mark's the expert on those things. I will definitely leave that one in his hands. But I do believe that, this is an ideal location from a site circulation perspective as far as trucks being able to come in and easily pick up the refuse and then leave.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions of Mr. Mosley from the board?
I have a couple, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mosley, just a couple. The observations that you took, was that a stacking configuration or was that a parking space pull in and back out maneuver?
At the existing site?
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a combination. There was a couple vehicles, and I think they were just like delivery-type vehicles in the rear of the building in Mount Holly, kind of in an isolated lot. It's not easily accessible for like, in and out movements. And then we saw vehicles parked parallel on the street in front of the building on both sides of, I think it's on Mill Street. And then we saw some vehicles parked, there's a public parking lot directly across the street. We saw people parking there and then walking to the building, picking up their products and then going back to their vehicles. So it wasn't a stacked, like a queue like you would see on like a drive-through line or something like that. It was people parking in designated public parking spaces.
Kind of all like a multitude of sort of different, some parallel, some perpendicular,
Yeah,
some...
perpendicular spaces in the lot across the street, and then parallel parking on the street in the designated parking spaces.
Did you go through, because we had some testimony last month, I think, in terms of the number of staff. I don't think your analysis included the apartments that are on site.
The apartments that are on site?
Yeah.
For
We eliminated those, Mr. Taylor. They're no longer any residential use on property.
Okay.
All right, so no on-site apartments?
Correct.
Yeah, the parking calculations I did were based on the pastor being there and then several staff people working in the facility during the day.
All right, and then what is the number of the food pantry that you had used for, is that 7?
So for the food pantry, I assume 15 vehicles for the food pantry.
For the clients, the visitors there?
Yeah, for the visitors, and then we assume that there's going to be probably anywhere from 7 to 9 employees between the pastor and anybody else working in the food pantry on the site as well. And we just assumed everyone has their own vehicle to be as conservative as possible.
All right, so 7 to 9 staff members.
And that's how we came up with 24 total vehicles.
Did you look at the site of that facility, overall sort of gross square footage of that facility versus this facility?
I did not, no. We did not do any kind of a comparison in size.
So, and I guess the question I'm saying is, your comment was, based on your worst case scenario of what you're seeing today out there at 15 vehicles per day, that 24-ish, maybe a little more, that having 29 will be sufficient for that. Would it be your opinion that if this site is 50% larger than the existing facility, that there could potentially be increased parking demand in the future?
I don't think the parking demand for this type of use is related to the building size. It's my opinion it's more related to just the operations and the service they provide. They provide a service to a specific population area. And I think, just moving the facility from Mount Holly to here, it's more a relocation of the operations here. It's not necessarily an expansion or something that's going to create more parking demands or parking needs. And I think you've heard testimony already that, if anything, it's probably going to be about the same, and they're going to be able to actually service, more people that would typically walk up at the, just using a delivery truck instead. So, in my opinion, that it's more just a transplant of the existing operations, not an expansion of that existing facility.
But I think when we started tonight, Mrs. Edwards was talking about how we're constantly seeing increased needs for these facilities and these types of uses for folks. So if this is successful and it grows in the future, how do we handle that?
I mean, I can't speak to the operations of how they would handle that. I think from a parking perspective, the fact that there's still additional parking can account for some increase in traffic and activity. I think also the fact that they operate over, several hours of time, and they can, for lack of a better word, they can process people in and out of the site very quickly, and they have people out there helping people as they come in. I think that will keep them from having a large peak parking demand, even if they were to have more people come to this site.
I have a general question for you.
Sure.
When you compare the parking proposal for this site as the site that you observed in Mount Holly, it's totally different, because that's scattered in the street, parking across the street. Here, we're going to have a more controlled parking area for the clients. So I envision that when they come in, they'll fill up the slots here.
Here and here, most likely. Anything closest, to, I think, to where the
So they'll
people
fill
will
up the
be.
slots and then just keep going out. So as they explained before, the slots just keep going up, and then as they empty, they just come back in and they get filled up, so that the control will happen easier, both for the operation and for the people going out. The only difficulty will be those people have to back out of the slot with the traffic coming back and forth, so that.
True. I think that's a good point. One thing, I didn't mention this, but the Mount Holly operation, people park and walk to the building. Here, they'll be able to park, and then people will really come and provide the service to them. So they're not even gonna, you're not gonna have as much time on the site. You won't have as many people necessarily walking around. As far as the parking with backing out and people coming in, I mean, the parking has been designed with, adequate aisle width to allow for those safe movements in and out, just like you would have at any other parking lot for an office building or a retail facility, or, something else that has, higher turnovers as well. So again, I think this layout can accommodate that.
Yeah, but I tried to make this more clear, both for me and for the people to see what's happening in there back and forth as compared to what you were able to observe in Mount Holly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? I have to get up and do this.
Not a problem.
So, if we have a car coming in, let's say we have a car leaving, okay? Have a car leaving.
Yes.
Don't these people have to wait till this car gets out of here, other than these few spots, to be able to at least make a turn to get in here? I just don't see, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I know traffic. How are they gonna get in here?
So this.
I don't see how they're gonna do that.
This area between the building and the parking space, which is what we call the parking aisle area or circulation aisle, it's 24 feet wide, which is sufficient to allow for two-way traffic as well as for safe movements in and out of a perpendicular parking space.
I agree, but not enough to make the turn. I mean, you're a traffic engineer. Tell me how these cars, even on your scale, how is a car going to make the turn when they're right there? And these cars are coming, I mean, we still drive on the right in this country, I think. I mean, unless these people are going to drive on the left to get out of here, they can't make the turn. They just flat out can't make it. I don't mean to be facetious, but I disagree with your testimony about people going back here. They just are going to have to wait to get in there.
So it's just like any time you're in a parking lot for a ShopRite or Wawa, whatever it may be, it's 24 feet wide in between the parking spaces. If there's somebody coming, towards you as you're coming into the site and you want to pull a right-hand turn into a parking space, sometimes you have to wait till that vehicle goes past you before you pull in. But again, 24 feet is wide enough to safely allow two-way circulation and traffic, and it's also wide enough to allow people to safely perpendicular park next to that drive aisle, or next to that circulation aisle. 24 feet is a standard used throughout the state that is accepted by IT and other design, and other agencies as well, from a traffic and circulation perspective.
Mr. Mosley, just as a comparison, if we were to go over to the ShopRite parking lot up the road, what are we going to find in terms of aisle width?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that question.
What are we going to find in terms of aisle width?
Typically 24 feet with parking on both sides.
They do it at ShopRite?
ShopRite? I'm sorry, I can't.
People are able to park at ShopRite?
Yes. I've been to that ShopRite many times. Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mosley.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Oh, sure.
I know you mentioned that you were at the Mount Holly site, and I mentioned this earlier to the pastor. The Mount Holly site is 25 miles an hour, the speed limit. You're talking 38 is 50, and 50 is going slow. People are doing 60 and 70. There's a
not-
deceleration lane that's right by the Wawa right there that's coming up that way. People are not decelerating. They want to beat everybody else on the left and right because they want to get ahead of everybody else. My second question to that is the city buses. The city bus is going to drop people off at the Wawa. Where are they walking? There's no sidewalk. They're going to be walking on the street. We talked about this in the last meeting. Has anything been decided about that? Because that's the length from the Wawa to that site. I mean, I have no idea. It might be a football field long to get there. I could be wrong. I'm not sure.
720 feet.
Pardon me?
720 feet.
So, I mean, there's going to be people walking on the street. The angle of that, the crossover, I've been here 20-plus years. I've seen many of accidents. I've also seen a kid get hit on a bicycle over there. Now you're asking people to cross the street. 25 miles an hour to 50 is a big difference. Reaction time's totally different than 25 miles an hour. So, what's your thoughts on that? Because that deceleration lane is not a deceleration lane. They pick up and they get moving.
So, a couple things to try and answer your question, if I don't do that, it's something else. As far as the comparison between the two, I mean, we really are focused on the parking. And in Mount Holly, people park on the street. It is 25 miles an hour, they park across the street. Here, everyone's gonna be on the site. You're not gonna have people park on the street. You're not gonna have that interaction of people getting in and out of their cars on the street. Obviously, this is a state highway with much higher rate of speed than we do in Mount Holly. As far as the access is concerned, again, like I said earlier, DOT has reviewed this. They have seen the proposed change in use. They have approved it based upon the existing conditions. They know that there is that additional, we call it an auxiliary lane, coming down Route 38 as you're going westbound. Near the frontage, it does taper out just prior to that driveway. So it's an existing condition. Again, DOT has approved it. I think given the use, it's not a high traffic generator. It's not a Wawa. It's not some kind of retail store or other things that would actually be permitted in this current zone. We're talking about a house of worship that provides some other amenities during the day. And I think given the fact that you're not going to be having a constant stream of traffic in and out of these driveways, that they can operate safely, even given those existing conditions on Route 38. One thing the signal does do, it does meter traffic as well, so it does create gaps on 38. So if someone's trying to make a right-hand turn out of here, they're going to have the ability, once that light turns green for Hainesport Mount Laurel and stop traffic on 38, to safely make a right turn out and continue on their way. But again, I don't think it's going to be a significant amount of traffic. And again, DOT has reviewed and approved this, and I think that it can work. It can work for this use.
Where are the people walking from that bus?
Right, the walking question. So again, yeah, the walking thing, if they're going to be walking down there, there's no dedicated sidewalks in this area. DOT has not installed those dedicated sidewalks within their right of way. You know, we obviously just have limited frontage. We don't have any control of anything between our site and where that bus stop is today. We're by the Wawa site. So I would just put that on record. That would be my answer. I don't have an answer to the question specifically. I would imagine they would walk hopefully behind the curb.
Would it be safer if there were sidewalks?
I mean, having a sidewalk typically is a benefit versus not having a sidewalk. But again, we have no, sorry. Is this not working? Does this work? No, it's not. Again, sidewalks are not a requirement within this area. We cannot provide that sidewalk beyond our frontage. If we had a sidewalk there, that would be a benefit. But again, there are no sidewalks in that area.
Has anyone contacted, I don't even know who you'd contact about moving the bus stop or adding a bus stop?
I mean, I have not contacted New Jersey Transit or anybody about that.
And that would solve an issue.
That would be under their purview and their jurisdiction.
The question to Mr. Mosley was, is it possible to move the Wawa bus stop, you know, closer to your facility and Mr. Mosley's response was that he didn't contact New Jersey Department of Transportation.
Yes.
Not that you were expected to.
No, I just haven't had any contact relative to that existing bus stop.
Okay.
Excuse me if I could, it would be New Jersey Transit, correct?
Yeah, New Jersey Transit has jurisdiction and responsibility over the bus stops and their locations.
Okay, Mrs. Andrews, you have next witness. Thank you, Mr. Mosley.
Mr. Mosley is going to be here, continue to be here, so any additional questions for him that come up at a later time, we're prepared to answer those. Moving on to our architect, if I could, Mr. Kurt Werner of JRP Architects in Riverton, Kent, forgive me.
That's right, Kurt's my brother.
Okay, I was working with a Kurt earlier today, and I got it on the brain, I apologize. Okay, Mr. Werner was sworn at the last
Right.
meeting, so he remains sworn. So, Mr. Werner, I'm going to ask you to walk us through the existing conditions on the site. Of course, we've already done that from an engineering standpoint, but from an architectural standpoint, describe the existing building to us, and then talk to us conceptually about any changes to be made to it, and then we can walk through the floor plan.
Of course. Ms. Edwards, can I offer a suggestion?
Yes.
You provided the board with that architectural rendering.
Yes.
I personally find this a lot easier to understand
Okay.
than the one-dimensional flat drawing. Do you have that poster size? Sure, yep.
Okay, should we put that up, and then we can walk through
Well, I'll
that?
leave it to the witness. I'm going to tell the witness what to do. I'm just asking if
Sure.
this drawing is perhaps more helpful.
Okay, let's go to that, and I'm going to give you the mic. What's that?
I don't know that I need a mic.
I do. I never
Yes,
think I
please.
Yes, you do. But I'm gonna actually be interacting with Mr. Werner during his testimony, but I actually have this.
What are we designating this?
We are calling that, you mean, what number?
What exhibit?
We're going to call that A7, I believe, right?
What is,
A7.
And this would be, an architect would call this what?
This is a three-dimensional rendering of the exterior of the buildings and the site.
Okay, so with reference to this three-dimensional rendering, Mr. Werner, if you'll walk us through the site, we'd appreciate it.
Of course. What we have here, we're calling this Building 1. This is the two-story residential building, formerly, as part of the art gallery mixed-use conglomeration of buildings. Building 2, which we refer to, was after the actual art gallery space itself. It's mostly open space with partitions, et cetera, on which they displayed the artwork. And Building 3, which was storage space for artwork, for matting, for framing supplies, et cetera, and workshop area. What's occurring now is we would be under the New Jersey Uniform Construction Code, Subchapter 6, Rehabilitation Subcode. This would be a renovation and alteration. The two-story former residence would become office space and a commercial kitchen. The art gallery space would become the house of worship and community area. The Code Blue Shelter would be on the first floor of Building 3. The food pantry would be on the first floor of Building 3. There would be storage space and staff space on the second floor of Building 3. Majority of the work on the interior would be the creation of additional partitions, demolition of some of the partitions to create the spaces to define those areas. Additional accessible restrooms would be added. Vertical circulation for accessibility would be added. And the exterior of the building would be treated. We're talking about using textured paint finish to provide a stucco look on the existing exposed block for Building 3 and Building 2. Building 1 would get new exterior siding
Both of the buildings that have existing fiberglass shingles or asphalt shingles, probably in this case, would receive new fiberglass shingles and underlayment, et cetera. And really, that's the extent of the work.
That's a good overview, okay. And just to clarify, there's no residential space as part of the renovation plan, correct?
As part of the renovation and alteration, no.
Okay. So no one will be living on site, as we indicated a few moments ago. That residential use that we had initially had as part of the plan, we have eliminated.
The R3 use would occur at those 12-hour periods when the code blue shelter would be in use.
Got it, okay. So really, it's because we're not doing any construction, it's renovation of an existing building. Our testimony is rather limited. I think Mr. Werner has provided a good overview, but we are happy to answer as many questions as anyone has about how we propose to use that structure, or structures.
Could you clarify a little bit what's happening in Building 1?
Sure. Building 1 is office space. On the first floor, there's a reception area. That would be, there would be an accessible entrance, and then office spaces and the commercial kitchen. And then on the second floor, there would be additional office spaces and an accessible restroom.
So there's a commercial kitchen on the first floor,
Yes,
and that's presumably to serve the community space?
correct.
And then there's also another kitchen on the second floor.
That's the existing kitchen in the residence. We'd be renovating that and keeping it as is.
Just for the office use?
Yes.
And then it looks like that wing, Building 1, will have 3 full baths?
The two existing toilet rooms are not accessible, so we added a fully accessible restroom.
And
You
that's-
say accessible, you mean handicap accessible.
Yes, sir.
So that's on the second floor?
Yes.
And the others are just, you're leaving the existing bathrooms?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Is there going to be an elevator?
Yes.
Where is that?
And that is the area where Code Blue would be?
No. Code Blue would be in Building 3 on the first floor.
Okay. And just explain, if you would, where the elevator
Oh, of
is and what
course.
it's intended to serve.
See it.
Of course. The elevator in which building?
One.
Oh, okay. Elevator in the Building 1 would be adjacent to the existing entrance to the building, which is not accessible. But it is accessible by way of a path through the first floor. Outside of the Building 3 would also have access to the second floor by way of a chairlift.
I don't see either of those on the rendering plans.
They're inside the building. They would be on the plan.
Pardon? I'm looking at this first one,
Are you looking at the floor plan, sir?
this.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's walk through the floor plan if we could.
Sure.
A8.
Okay.
That's why I brought this here.
Just walk us through from one end, starting with Building 1.
Of course. Building 1 accessible entrance would be here into the waiting area. Adjacent to the existing stair, which is on a split level here, would be the lift here, which is adjacent to the two new office spaces that would take you up to the second level here.
You mean elevator? You mean elevator, correct?
Yes,
Okay, not a chairlift, an elevator.
limited use, limited access elevator.
Elevator.
Okay, and then just wind us through the house of worship
Sure.
space, if you would.
Sure. From Building 1 into the House of Worship, we have another accessible toilet room, storage space, office space, the worship area, community area, access back into the Code Blue space, where we have a bathroom, changing room area, times 2, and then an office space with a reception desk and the food pantry space.
Okay, and then on the second floor of building number 3?
Second floor, building number 3, again, this would be a staff space with an accessible restroom, and then storage space on the second level with an office adjacent to it.
Okay, and when we talk about staff space, we're talking about office space?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, what's that space for? The room 201, building 3?
that's a staff area.
So just Code Blue staff or all staff?
I believe that's all staff.
What is the common room then in Building 1, on the second floor of Building 1? You still have a common room and a dining room and the kitchen.
Those are existing spaces, which again would be used as part of the office space. Essentially a break room area
In Building 1 or in Building 3?
in Building 1.
So is Building 3, is that 700 square feet a different staff break room?
That's also a break room area.
And then the other offices, I guess, are individual offices, because I think there are 3 employees.
Correct. I'm sorry, was that a question?
Just, yeah, trying to clarify. Okay. Or actually, I guess there are 4, so there's 5 offices in Building 1, correct?
Correct.
That was all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Distribution office. I see it.
Other questions for Mr. Werner at this time?
Okay, now, you have another witness coming, right?
We do. We have our planning consultant after
All right.
Mr. Werner
I want
concludes.
to take a 10-minute break for everybody.
Got it.
So we'll reconvene in 8:30, okay?
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Mr. Warner.
I have to keep running back. That's gotta keep running.
Oh, use the judges.
I'm gonna go ahead and plug that in. I'm a little worried about it now too.
Well, it's parking, notwithstanding the...
Can you go into the bathroom back here?
I'm sure that they could expand the parking.
Go into the bathroom.
to that
Get me a
grassy
paper
area.
towel.
I spilled some water. What's that?
I don't, how close are they to impervious cover list?
What? We can't get into that. We can't get into it.
No, that's an HDF.
We can't ask it.
There's another one here, but it's, yeah, but it's sort of up here.
Fine? No, I asked her to get a paper towel for me, and I spilled some water. I'll wipe this up. Can they hear us okay?
Catholic Church.
No, when I opened the water, I had a tough time with it.
Squeeze it a little.
Yep.
I'm worried. I've never seen anybody create 1,000 square feet as a break room for 3 employees.
Hi.
What was that? Okay, I'll check it.
I'm worried about the growth down the road. That's my biggest concern. Because a 10% increase in their growth, and none of our numbers are. When they're moving here because, as Erica said, there's an increasing demand for this. That's why they're moving That's where I'm struggling.
Wait till every testimony.
Tomorrow, but I had a
I respect that. You probably did the right thing. Well, if we, and they don't like it. They don't think we should have done the church. They don't want the meeting should have done it. They shouldn't have done it. Add it to that.
I was actually surprised that I probably read it, I forgot to hear it again today. My yard is
Look, I get 49, and it ain't gonna be 49. Add it to that, the trash is closed.
I do have a just so that you know. Oh, no, so that was. Okay, that's fine with me. And there's one of them that's.
He doesn't want to do the plan, right?
I think it probably depends on how long public comment goes. So I'm guessing that we're going to get through it since there's only one more person to testify. And then after that, we'll ask if we have any more questions first. We'll ask if the professionals have any more questions. Then they'll ask for public comment. So then yeah, it'll get, I mean, unless for some reason they want to defer it to next month again because they haven't agreed to all of the stipulations, then it could possibly be postponed to next month again. Because this happens often, so this isn't unusual, no. So, because a lot of times, like, they gave us a list of everything that, like, they're not according to the variances, and so.
One of our neighbors, finally, huh?
And so their side will say.
Hello there.
We agree to A, B,
How have you been?
C, and then our side says, but we still want X, Y, Z. So then they will say yes or no, and then they gotta go back and forth again. So.
Yes,
Yes. Yes. So someone will make a motion, and they might ask Mr. Kingsbury, our attorney, to word it the correct way. And so then we say, yes, what he said. So then it's in the record. So, and then it's, however it votes. Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't heard them say anything about the size compared to the land. But it might, that might be something that, because New Jersey is such a tiny state and everything is close together anyway, so there might be different laws, I guess. Yes, I was surprised. Yes. But if you think about, think about even the churches that are along, what is that, Masonville Road? You know what I'm talking about? You've got the one little church that just celebrated 100 or 150 years. That's very tiny. And then if you keep going, there's another one that's on the left, and that's very tiny too. So.
This point.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think a lot of churches, now I'm not Catholic, so I don't know how the Catholic Church works, but I know with the Protestant churches, a lot of them have stuff during the week that people go to, there might be a women's Bible study, there might be a men's Bible study, there might be a senior citizen group that meets, there might be a children's whatever. So, they could possibly have just as many cars as what this place would have. Think of it.
How you
Yes. Yes. They have. We got the letter. Yeah, it's in this packet, they didn't at the last meeting, but they have it now. So, yes, and that'll get entered into the record. So,
Now.
What's your name, by the way?
Quiet about that.
What's your last name?
There's a lot of stuff just.
AUNGST, all right.
Well, all this open space they're just doing, it is with
Nice to meet you.
more space than they ever had.
They're building extra bathrooms and building extra kitchens, which are really, really expensive. And building bathrooms and showers.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, but I think because they have a history already in Mount Holly of what they've been doing, and so the cars haven't, they gave us a copy of the study that the traffic engineer was talking about, so you could see, he did for the whole day actually, how many cars came in and out. Yeah.
Those new people, there's 8 of them, but only 2 at a time.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Right. Yes. Well, I mean, I think it would be the same thing as cars that are pulling into Wawa. They might go through that light and they pull into Wawa on 38, so if one's pulling in, that's like a steep driveway right there, you definitely have to slow down. Yeah, and I think it's...
Can everybody please be seated so we can continue the meeting?
Too, similar. Oh, hope that helped a little bit. Nice to meet you.
Your coat's still there, Dee. Counselor, it's all yours. Next witness, please.
Water in there?
That's all. You gotta wait till they
Appreciate it.
settle down.
Put a little gin in that. Best.
Okay, Counselor?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought this might be a good opportunity to ask Pastor Trappier to answer a few questions that were asked at the outset of the hearing about the service area for the organization, about how the Mount Holly Police, the relationship between Beacon of Hope and the Mount Holly Police, the Township Committee, the governing body. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to bring her up and answer those questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
This part of the meeting is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so Darlene, let's address those questions that were asked at the outset of the hearing. Let's talk first about the service area for the organization. We know you're currently based in Mount Holly. What area do you serve? The people you serve, where do they come from?
We serve all of Burlington County.
Okay, so...
Burlington County.
Of
Is
those...
that microphone working?
Of those using your
Thank you.
services now from the Mount Holly location, you have people from throughout Burlington coming to get services?
Yes, from throughout Burlington County because we're contracted with Burlington County.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have a follow-up question, any follow-up questions to that?
I think would be helpful if we just understood the contractual arrangements between yourself, the county, funding, support, that sort of thing. It would paint for me at least, a clearer picture.
Okay, I'm a member of the Continuum of Care with the Burlington County, where we provide, it's called Citizens Serving the Homeless, but they don't necessarily have to be homeless. We provide assistance to individuals. We have a contract with the county where we provide assistance to those who are in need, whether it's for a mortgage, for rent, for utilities, for emergency shelter, for security deposit, first month's rent, for a host of services that the county would refer them out to us, as well as any other agency that's contracted with Burlington County. I also have a contract with the state of New Jersey, where we provide assistance to individuals that are in need. They don't necessarily have to be homeless. If they have a need, they will reach out to us and contact us and see if we have funding to provide. So we get funding from the state of New Jersey, we get funding from Burlington County, and we get funding from FEMA. And we'll also have a contract with Salvation Army Service Unit.
That answer your question, sir?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else have any questions on that issue of service area? Or how Beacon of Hope interrelates their partnerships with other organizations?
I have one question that's kind of on the subject, but during your introductory comments, you talked about the increasing need for the services that they provide. But yet, when we were just talking about the parking situation over here, we're like maxed out with, if you proceed with this, unless I misunderstood something, but clarify that, because,
Yes, can I answer that? The need has increased throughout the country. I was one of 25 chosen throughout the United States to go to the Hunger Summit that was in Washington, D.C. So the need is greater, and it's not necessarily just for food, it's for all types of assistance that we provide through contractual agreements that we have on different levels. So when she said that the need is increasing, there's an increased need for eggs. So instead of giving a dozen eggs, we may give a family 3 dozen of eggs because we're an agency partner with the Food Bank of South Jersey. So the need has increased throughout the country. People are struggling to pay their rent. People can't pay their mortgage. They can't pay their car payments. They can't pay their co-pays. So when they talk about the need, the increase of the needs, that's what she is referring to. The need is greater, especially since COVID. People are struggling. So it's not just me, it's any agency in the state of New Jersey, in the country, in the world. Everybody is looking for help, and that's what we're trying to do, is to provide help to those who are in need. And I've been a resident of Hainesport going on 22 years. And we help people in Hainesport. I've been helping people for the past 15 years in Hainesport. They come to our facility, I've gone to their homes, I've taken tough stuff to the schools, I work with the school district, so the need has increased. People can't buy school supplies, so we supply that to their children. So when she talks about the need has increased, the need has increased. And that's what we're here to do, is to help meet that need for you guys as well. So we're here to help you. So if given the opportunity to come into the community, you can come help us to help others, because we believe in changing lives one heart at a time. And that's basically what we do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Darlene, can I ask you to talk or speak to Beacon of Hope's relationship with the Mount Holly Police Department, to the extent that you have any interaction with the police department? How does that work?
We interact with Mount Holly Police Department, Maple Shade, Mount Laurel, State Troopers. Then there's the winter, Code Blue, they do a sweep, they have my cell phone number, they call me, they say, do you have room at your Code Blue shelter? I say yes. They ask me, do we need supplies? We say yes. So they bring us supplies, they bring us blankets, they bring us hygiene kits, they bring us food, they bring us clothing, so they do clothing drives and they bring it to us. They've asked me to come out and speak to individuals that they have on the streets, whether it's Mount Holly, whether it's the state troopers, whether it's, I've gone as far as Marlton, when someone was in distress and they needed a clergy to come talk to them, or just someone that operates in what I do to come talk to them. So we do, I've been able to go talk with them, I've been able to calm the situation and to convince them to go and get the help that they need. So that's what we do. Mount Holly, I have Chief's cell phone number. I have a lot of the police officers. I have their cards, their business cards in my wallet. So they know to reach me, I can reach them. And we have a very good working relationship. Mount Holly kind of really was like, you're leaving? And it's like, yeah, we need a bigger space, but there was no space in Mount Holly at this present time that could accommodate we need more storage space to do what we do, to be able to help the people that we help. So I pray that you give us the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
One follow-up question, Darlene. Do you have any contact with or work at all with the governing body in Mount Holly?
Yes, I have a connection with the Mount Holly, I think they've changed their names. It used to be the Board of Chosen Freeholders, but now they're the Burlington County Commissioners. Yes, I have a good working relationship with him. I have a good working relationship with Congressman Andy Kim, with Governor Murphy, Senator Singleton. So whoever is available and I can pull their ear to get some assistance to those who are in need, I may be knocking at y'all door and saying, I need help for individuals. People are hurting, and yeah, so I would love to be in Hainesport, and I live here, and to be able to help more families here, that's what I would like to do.
Sounds good. I just wanted to make one comment. You mentioned that I had said that, the need is growing, and as Darlene kind of emphasized what I said, I mean, the need is growing throughout the country. Times don't seem to be getting easier. They get becoming more challenging for more people. And just as an aside, I happen to, in the community in which I live, have some, and this is just anecdotal, I'm not testifying, I know I'm not permitted to do that, but as a community member myself, I have some contact with the food, with a food pantry in the county in which I live, and one of the issues that they've emphasized to me when we've been speaking about the work that they do is that, unfortunately, I mean, anybody who's in need, it's an unfortunate situation, but the senior community, the senior population is among the fastest growing segments of the food challenged community, people who don't have enough to eat. It's hard to imagine sometimes in New Jersey. Many of our communities are affluent, but even in the most affluent communities, there is still need. And the seniors are really being squeezed, for lack of a better way to say it. I spent a lot of time I was a municipal official for 20 years, and I spent a lot of time working with seniors, and so I have a special place in my heart for them, and for the challenges that they face, and it's that is sad that they are really feeling the pressure in increasing numbers. So, but that's I won't go on anymore about my feelings about that. But I do want to say that we acknowledge. I mean, it goes without saying that any site that's the subject of an application like this. I mean, there are parameters. There are limits to any site. We know that. And we know that you can use, to an extent anyway, if you are inclined, and we're not even at the point of deliberating and voting yet, but if you are ultimately inclined to approve this application, you know that you can put some parameters on us with conditions of approval. We know that too, and that's the reality. We're standing here before you ultimately asking for relief, and we know that if we're fortunate enough to get it, we're also going to be expected to comply with conditions. We don't expect to serve the entirety of the state of New Jersey from this site. It's just not realistic. What we do hope to do is by utilizing this site in a responsible way, we hope to inspire other organizations, other people to start other organizations, other places. We want to be responsible about the way we use this site, if you allow us to, and to inspire others to create sites throughout New Jersey and beyond. That's what we do. That's what Darlene is. She's an expert at inspiring people. I'm one of them. There are county officials who are among them. There are her clients, probably some people in this room behind me. By the time we're done, they'll be inspired too. So with that, I'd like to bring up our planning consultant, if I could, Mr. Remsa, who was previously sworn.
And if I can, before Mark starts.
Sure.
Pastor or Ms. Edwards, is there sort of understanding that we're understanding an increased need for these services? And throughout the country, everywhere. And we're moving into bigger space here. Do you have projections of what your anticipated growth is for funding for any of your contractual obligations with any of these entities? Do you anticipate a 2% growth, a 10% growth? Do you have any projections at all? I would say in clientele and/or funding.
Funding always increases. It depends on, you have to write for the grants, you have to write for the contracts, and it just depends on how many people are applying. The contracts I usually get are anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So we have a constant cash flow. As far as clients, before COVID, we had a large group of individuals that were coming to get food, but since COVID, a lot of people are afraid to leave their homes and come to facilities. So there's times when we deliver to people's homes because they just don't want to come out. So the numbers have decreased.
About how much?
We were operating before COVID at 200% capacity. Now we're operating maybe at like 60, 70% capacity. So that's a big drop. We lost a lot of people to COVID
So you're doing about a third.
of what we were doing before, yes. But the wraparound services have increased. And those are not necessarily individuals that have to come to the facility. We can do all of those services online over the phone to provide the rent and the utilities and things like that, so they don't necessarily have to come. We can take care of those on the phone and request everything we need through email or fax.
Just if you would, Darlene, again, wraparound services.
Wraparound services are services that we provide to individuals that are in need, whether it's rent, utilities, mortgage, security deposit, first month's rent, emergency motel placement, emergency transportation, prescription copays, things like that. Those are what we call wraparound services, services that people use every day but find that they're having a hard time maintaining. So we fill in the gap.
And is there some anticipated number? Is it a 5 or 10% annual growth, or is there some anticipation?
Maybe of 2 to 3% growth in those services.
If and God willing, COVID is behind us, and you got back to that other triple what you're doing now, would this site accommodate that?
Probably not, but we work in unison with St. Andrews. So we would be able to split our time between here and St. Andrews. We do a lot with St. Andrews.
Okay. Because obviously, as Mr. McKay indicated, I think, for me, the public safety issue of the parking, while the use is great and obviously inherently beneficial in New Jersey, under the land use law, the parking issue and the parking generation and the potential for that to create a problem is really my largest concern, and trying to make sure that this is right for you guys and make sure that it can actually function here. And if this has the potential to triple, you know, that's a little concerning. That actually calls, you know, Mr. Mosley saying that we do have enough parking based on the counts that were taken, you know, last week out in Mount Holly. But, you know, like I said, if we're fortunate enough that COVID is behind us, and unfortunate enough that more and more folks need this service, my question is, can this site accommodate you? And that's sort of rhetorical for your end, but kind of for the board. And while I appreciate Ms. Edwards saying that the board can impose conditions, it's really for the applicant to address the negative criteria and convince the board why this use works and how all those things are being addressed.
Right. Well, see, we're not the only agency in the area, so it's not going to impact us. because there's so many other agencies that are doing the same thing in the surrounding area in Burlington County. So it's spread out. People stay where they're comfortable with. So if Mount Holly and Hainesport and Lumberton and West Hampton and East Hampton is comfortable with me, they're going to stay with me. If they're in Willingboro and Burlington and Bordentown, they're going to stay in that area. If they're in Browns Mills and Wrightstown and Pemberton, they're going to stay in that area. So they pretty much stay wherever they're to the closest place. So that's why our numbers would not increase, because everybody goes to the pantries that they're closest to, so it will not impact us.
I think one thing we need to emphasize, and Darlene can obviously speak to the details on this, I mean, the need is serviced by, or served rather, by many partners. That's why, I mean, there are many organizations providing some overlapping services, but complementary services. I mean, the need is such that it takes a lot of partners to address the needs of the community, and we'll be doing our part, God willing, no pun intended, from this site. We'll be doing our part, but we know that we have limits there. And we certainly don't want to be a problem on, we want the site to function well for us too. So we understand that we will, that there are other organizations providing similar services. They're going to continue to do what they do in their area. We're going to partner, as Darlene said, with other community service organizations to provide as much, to leverage ourselves from other locations as we can.
Okay, let's move on to your next witness,
Very good.
please.
Mr. Remse is our planning consultant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and members of the public.
Is that microphone working?
I believe it is.
Okay, can everybody hear? Yes. Okay.
My name is Mark Remse. I'm a licensed professional planner and also a licensed landscape architect in the state of New Jersey. So my professional credentials allow me to talk about planning as well as good design. Let me talk about the property first. We've heard a lot about the property. It's block 101.02, lot 5. It's on the northern side of Route 38. It's approximately 0.9 acres, almost an acre in size. It's a little irregularly shaped. What's on the site now is a former art dealer and retail use, and that's currently vacant. And the zoning is the HC Highway Commercial Zone. It's also in the redevelopment area, but there's no redevelopment plan for it. So I'm not sure what any redevelopment aspects apply, but it is in the HC zone. So let's take a look what surrounds the property. So to the north, and I'm going to pull up one of the aerials because I think it's very helpful.
Which one is that? E what?
It's new.
Or A?
It says A1 on there.
Okay.
So on A1, you see the trapezoid outlined in red. That's the property. Route 38 runs along almost the center of the property. So to the north of the property, north points upward on the sheet, we have a parking lot. To the east is the Legacy building. That's the building that's also has inherently beneficial use in it. It's got the social services we heard about earlier. So to the south, across the highway, currently, it's a former car dealership, and we have open space and farmland. And we heard it's approved for future residential use. So to the west, we heard a lot of talk about what's to the west. Who owns all this woodlands? Well, this is all part of the Glen at Masons Creek, right? So this is part of the age-restricted housing development that's to the west. And you can sort of see there's a stream that runs through here, goes underneath the highway, and collects the water, and it conveys it to the north. So that's what surrounds the property. Parking lot, office building, empty former car dealership, open space and farmlands and woodlands, and several hundred feet farther, you have the age-restricted houses. We heard a lot about the proposal. I'm not going to dive into the same depth because we talked about it a lot, but essentially we have a house of worship. We have the life skill classes. We have the Code Blue warming shelter. We have the food pantry and the clothing distribution. Those are the primary uses that are proposed. And we heard about the same hours of operation. I'm not going to dwell on that because we talked about that at extent. But the important thing is those hours of operation don't really overlap. We've heard that through the pastor, we heard that through the traffic consultant, and now I'm telling you that these uses are all independent uses that operate separately. They're not concurrent. So let's talk about some of the variances that are requested. Obviously, we have a use variance. This type of use, and I agree with Mr. Taylor, this is an inherently beneficial use, and we're going to get into that because there are special proofs for inherently beneficial use. But there are a number of both variances and design exceptions associated with the proposal. So we have a minimum lot area variance that's due to the fact that the HC zone requires 40,000 square foot minimum, and we're at almost 39,000 square feet. That's an existing condition. Also, we have a minimum front yard setback, and that's to the, you heard it talk about that, it's part of the existing house portion of the various buildings on the site. 90 feet's required. The existing setback is 47.6 feet. Minimum side yard setback, 25 feet's required. And again, this is an existing condition to the house, 15.52 feet. We can't change that. That's where the property line is, that's where the buildings exist. Minimum setback from the parking, from the side or rear yard, 20 feet's required, and I think we adjusted that, Mark, is that now 10 feet? 4 and 10 feet. That has to do with, I'm going to go over to A6. Ten feet for the parking here along the eastern property line, 4 feet over here along the northern stretch of that eastern part. That's where that variance is. And it's right next to, we had talked about the open grass area that had been perhaps a right-of-way at some time, and that's next to the Legacy office building. And because we're proposing an accessory structure in the front yard, that's also a variance. It's located approximately right here, near the egress driveway from the site. Design exceptions. Buffer standards, you're required to have grass, trees, and shrubs. So certain areas, it's lacking in that. It's not as extensive as the ordinance requires. However, the revisions to the plan are going to address that, and it will beef up those buffer requirements. Also, the off-street parking maximum number of access drives, even though New Jersey Department of Transportation approved the two existing driveways, your ordinance only permits one. We have two existing. Buffer for parking, a screen from an adjoining street, well, that's the highway. We have limited buffering, but I believe we're going to address that through additional landscaping. So we had a lot of talk about what the ordinance requires for parking. Well, I calculate we need 46 spaces, according to your ordinance. So your ordinance talks about one space per 3 seats. We have 39 seats, means 13 parking spaces. One space for the pastor, and we have 3 employees. So we have 13, 1, 3, so we get 17. So your ordinance does not have a requirement for food pantry. However, it does have it for the community center, and we calculate that by one space per 100 square feet of gross floor area, 2,860 square feet of gross floor area, that requires 29 spaces. So if we add 17 plus 29 according to your ordinance, that's 46 spaces. That's what required. It's additive. However, none of the uses run concurrently, so then we default to what the peak use of the property is. We heard extensive testimony from Mr. Mosley. He believes that the peak car use would occur with the food pantry, and he says there's 24 peak hour or peak use of parking, and we have 29 spaces. Also, minimum loading, there's one space that's required. There's no real loading space for this proposal. Also, your ordinance requires shade trees along the street, 50 feet on center. We can address that by adding another tree or two, and that eliminates that design exception. So that's the extent of the variances related to the bulk standards, and also your design exception that we're asking for. So these bulk standards and design exceptions weave their way into the proofs that I now have to give you related to the proposed use. So the proposed use is an inherently beneficial use. And inherently beneficial uses are treated specially under the law. So they're already assumed to promote the purposes of the municipal land use law, because it's an important use that's with a public interest at stake. So what's the public interest at stake here? Well, we've had quite an extensive discussion on it, but essentially it boils down to the house of worship and the social support services that are being provided. So the next part of the test is once we've identified the public interest at stake, then we have to look at whatever detrimental effects would ensue from the granting of the use variance. Well, let's start off with the minimum lot size. It's almost at an acre. We've heard about the coverages, that they meet your ordinance, so the intensity of use in terms of building and lot coverage and impervious cover are not at play here. Also, the deficient front yard setback for the parking from the front yard. Well, parking already occurs there now, even though it's a gravel area. What we're doing now is better defining where the parking can be. And given the shape of the property, given the location of the existing buildings, in practical terms, the only place parking can occur is in the front and along the side. So, and the functionality of the property is good. And I'll talk a little bit more about the location of that trash enclosure, and recycling enclosure up front. I too subscribe to the general design approach that you really don't want to put your trash enclosure out front. However, good design and good design principles are not driven by just one element. They're driven by many elements. So you have to consider how the property is constrained, the flow, safety. If the trash enclosure is back here or here, forces a truck to really move in and then back up, back up, back up, back up. That is not a safe condition. That is not good design. Yes, locating the, and then also by adding more parking or driveway aisles back here creates more impervious cover. Not good for the environment. More stormwater runoff. Better design is to locate the functioning trash enclosure where it makes most sense, given the constraints of the property. And even though it's located out front here, it can be designed to be aesthetically pleasing and not obtrusive in the landscape. So, and now I'm speaking to you as a landscape architect. So in terms of the deficient parking, yes, on paper we're deficient because we're providing 29 spaces, and your ordinance says we need, what did I say,
44.
46.
I said 46 spaces.
46, yeah.
Thanks for reminding me. So when we look at the parking, we have to look at what the peak use is. And Mr. Mosley, in my opinion, did an excellent job explaining what the demand would be. And with all due respect to Scott talking about projections and forecasts for the future, this is what we're proposing now. These are the constraints that we're under, and the parking is going to have to occur with what we're presenting to you. And given the fact that the peak demand is 24 spaces, we have 25, and even if we were 10% off, that's another 2, that's 26. Round up with from the decimal to 27, you still have sufficient parking. And remember, that parking demand is occurring 1 day a week for 4 hours. And we heard that the peak time for parking is 15 spaces. And then it fluctuates throughout the day. And even if we had a higher demand, what the applicant is able to do, and you can condition this, is by saying we can break it up to 2 days,
so that we don't have all the peak demand that overwhelm the property. You could have 2 4-hour days of serving the people who want to drive in, and they can coordinate through the reservations of time for the people who need to have food and clothing to be picked up. So as far as from a planning perspective, the site is sufficient in terms of parking supply.
May I just ask you one question on that?
Absolutely.
Your last statement?
Yes.
That presumes that they get a use variance for the parking.
Well, the parking variance would be subsumed into the use variance. That's how that works.
Yeah, I know, but you're looking at 20 feet required. Mr. Malakowski, you were talking about 10 feet, but then you want to go to 4 feet?
Oh, in terms of the...
From the property line.
Yeah, so you have to look at what is the impact to the neighboring property. So right here, we have...
Excuse me, with all due respects, I'd suggest we look at the Hainesport ordinance in conjunction with the impact on the neighboring property.
Well, the Hainesport ordinance says it has to be, what did I say, 20-foot setback? Right, so in all practicality, the building is located here. We can't shift the building to accommodate the setback for your ordinance. So we're constrained by where the building is. And so you have the industry standard of the driving aisle width, which, by the way, is ShopRite, Wegmans, Wawa. They're all 24 feet wide.
But what is the setback requirement from the property line, which is this direction?
From here to here?
No.
From here to here?
Where's the property line?
The red line is the property line.
And then what's the setback supposed to be according to our ordinance?
20 feet.
Huh?
20 feet.
Okay, and you're proposing...
10 feet here
Yeah.
and 4 feet here.
Well, that's what I said in the beginning.
So you have to look at, for the use variance, you have to look at what the detriment is, and is it so negative, impacting your neighbor? So the answer is no. You've got let's see.
Can we quiet it down, please?
You have almost 40 feet from the property line to the edge of the building on your neighboring property. This is all open grass. They don't even have the buffer that they're required to put in. It's just open. We're proposing to put landscaping and attractive ornamental fencing along here to create the buffer from that neighbor. So in reality, when you look at the property line, look at the two properties, there'll be a property line here, but you don't know the property there, so you'll see all this open space. So there's really no negative impact to the legacy property.
Okay.
And also, the other one was the required loading space. Well, this is not a major warehouse operation, retail operation. The trucking, the spot would be located here, and the offloading from a small box truck or van could easily occur and be scheduled to offload next to the building, so we have no issues with the need for a designated loading space. No different than the Wawa that's down the street, with probably gets many more times loading and deliveries with small articulated trucks. They don't really have a loading space either. This pales in comparison to any kind of operation that's a major retail
food and vending kind of operation. So the next prong of the test is from identifying the public interest at stake, what the potential detriment is, and what can be done to alleviate or reduce the negative impact, if any, from those. And I sort of talked a little bit about that. And we'll start off with, again, there's no real negative impact by putting the parking closer to the property line because there's no windows or anything on this side of the building. This building has an unusual architecture where the windows are all up high. This space is quite expansive. There's really no negative impact if the parking was to be located there. The fact that the parking in the front, it has to be where it is. We can't move the building back. The accessory building that's located off a structure for the trash enclosure, is it desirable to have the trash enclosure in the front? No, it's not. However, given the good design, which is the balancing of all the other aspects of looking at the property and the functionality of how the property operates, this is the ideal location and the safest location for the truck to enter and exit and not commingle with any other vehicles and has better vision. And can it be reduced in its impact? Absolutely. Mr. Taylor recommended putting in the split block masonry enclosure. That would improve the aesthetics. And if you have the proper landscaping around it, you would barely notice that it's really a trash enclosure. So there's really no major visual impact. And in terms of the parking, I think Mr. Mosley has, in my opinion, demonstrated that the peak parking demand is 24. We have 29. And even if we add 10% buffer, and I said round up 27, we still have sufficient. And if the demand ever grew beyond what was happening on one Friday, they could add a second day of 4 hours and coordinate with their clientele, and you wouldn't have the same overwhelming effect of demand for parking on the property. So the last prong of the test is you have to weigh the positive and negative criteria, the public interest against the public detriment. And so we've talked extensively about what the public interest is. So really, what is the resultant public detriment of having this house of worship and social services located on this property? So I struggle to find any significant negative or detriment to the public from this. Remember, this is an inherently beneficial use, and so there's no major negative impact. We can ameliorate it with landscaping and fencing. We can improve the aesthetics here. The circulation of the property operates quite well. You heard about the control of how the food pantry operates, and there's sufficient peak parking. So in conclusion, I believe that the use variance with those other bulk variances can be granted for this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rimsa, can you address your opinion on the impact of this proposed development on the master plan?
That's not a requirement of an inherently beneficial use. That's not part of the legal test.
Can you address it anyway?
I'm not going to address it because it's irrelevant.
So you have no opinion?
I will repeat myself. It's irrelevant because the legal proofs for an inherently beneficial use do not relate to the master plan.
Well, I'll repeat myself. Do you have an opinion? Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer the question because it's an irrelevant question. Knowing that it's an inherently beneficial use, it doesn't have to, it's not part of the test.
Is your client willing to make changes in this plan, or are you locked in effect, to the parking layout, the garbage truck layout, the declining to add parking to the back, like I suggested at the front end of this?
I don't represent the client in that terms, but...
Maybe that's a better question for counsel than who just rose.
Yes.
Actually, I'm good, Mark, because I think they want to ask you more questions. But we certainly want to hear if the board wants to explore with us potential variations on our design. We certainly would like to hear that.
Well, you heard it. You heard it from me as one member.
It did.
Right at the front end. And I got rebuffed on every one of my suggestions. So that's why I asked you whether your plan was etched in stone from your point of view.
I don't recall you asking me that in just so many words, but I've
distilled it. But I spent a good bit of time right at the front end of this, talking with your engineer about all these items.
Let me speak as the applicant's legal representative. I am always careful to say, or not to say, that anything is etched in stone. We want to remain open to suggestions and to further considerations, and I'd like to hear more discussion about it if it's something that the board wants to talk about, and then we'll speak to, I'll speak to my client and speak to the other members of the team. I mean, it's a, but the client ultimately makes the decision.
Of course, we all know that. The question is, if you were to make some modifications to this plan, is that something that is best accomplished by adjourning this and having discussions with our professional board, and changes could be made, or maybe they won't be made?
I think that, I think certainly that's a potential plan. Is that the best plan to adjourn it? It might be, is my answer. It might be.
Just one board member.
Understood. Maybe we can, I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous. I'm not a member of the board. I'm certainly not the chairman of the board. I don't want to be presumptuous and start polling members of the board about that issue, but perhaps this is a good time to hear from other members of the board about the issues that Mr. McKay has raised. Again, I'm not in a position to poll the board, but Mr. Chairman, what do you think?
I have a question. Traffic engineer, I think you repeated it 4 times, maybe 5 times, that this project was approved by the DOT.
That is true.
I take exception to that, and maybe need some more education on that. I'm just curious, when the DOT took over our job with site planning, isn't he talking about the entrance and the exit is approved only from 38, or are you trying to tell myself and the rest of the board that they approved this whole project?
Just for the record again, Nathan Mosley. My testimony, if it wasn't clear before, the testimony was that the DOT has approved the change in use for this project to be a house of worship compared to what it was before, and that's relative to the usage of the driveways along Route 38 as they exist today. That's what DOT has jurisdiction over, is the existing access points, the future access points relative to the use of the property, and they've approved the use on the property and the driveways that exist today for that use.
Does the board have access to that request of DOT?
I can provide a copy of the approval, yeah. that's
When was that request made? Because there's been a lot of changes. This has been very fluid, it seems, the project, some changes have been made. Parking standards have changed. The residents, the employee residents are no longer there. At what point was the request made? Does DOT need to be wrapped into any of these changes? And do we have access to the original request document?
So the approval was granted on September 29th, 2022 by DOT. That's when the letter was received back. I don't remember the exact date of the submission. I can double check that and get back to you in a second. DOT has jurisdiction over the driveways and the use on the property. As far as the parking, the internal circulation, those items are site plan related, with the jurisdiction being with the township.
Right.
So DOT approves the driveways, whether it's a new driveway or an existing driveway. That's where their jurisdiction basically ends, is at their right-of-way line. So everything internal, it's really the use, which is, we provided them with an analysis based on the square footage of the building and the use of the building, and how that relates to the trip generation for it compared to what was previously on the site, showing that it's not a significant increase in traffic based upon it being previously commercial office space and now it being a house of worship. They reviewed all that information and they issued their letter in September that approved that use of the driveway for that use. So I can give you a copy. If you give me a minute or two, I can tell you the date we submitted that request to the DOT as well, but that's the process.
I would also take exception to your statement about 24 feet being the same as Wawa or ShopRite. Let's not forget that they're going in both directions on Wawa and ShopRite, and not one way in. So I think from a layman's point of view, there's a big difference in the feasibility of parking back there, since there's only one way in, and only one way out.
And I think you also mentioned before, Mr. McLaughlin, that there's a difference between traffic in the Wawa and ShopRite parking lot versus Route 38. It's a little faster on 38.
It depends.
Well, and the other thing, I still have a question. When a person gets off a bus, I didn't realize the shoulder is the sidewalk. The shoulder is something for a car to pull over when he's got an issue or a problem or pulling into the Beacon of Hope. There's people walking on that shoulder to get into the Beacon of Hope. If you look at the ground level, walking from that bus stop on the grass, it is so unlevel and uneven. I can't understand why you can't have, there should be a sidewalk, and also probably a place for them to be covered when they're waiting for that bus to come. Where are they gonna go? Are they gonna wait in Wawa to know when that New Jersey Transit's gonna come? So, I still have a problem with the shoulder. The shoulder's not a sidewalk.
The state highway is a state facility. The state provides bus service for all of the properties along Route 38. They provide them for the residents who live nearby. The state is responsible for how it operates its facilities. And so I see people walking along Route 38 all the time, getting off the bus and utilizing the state facility. And they walk to the various offices, stores. So this is the same situation for every use that's developed along Route 38. Municipalities have the option to contact New Jersey Transit to locate bus shelters. It falls on the municipality's shoulders. How do I know that? Well, I used to be the Director of Planning and Economic Development for Burlington County and have dealt with New Jersey Transit and locating shelters. And so we have been able to do that, but also the municipalities have to agree because the responsibility of taking care of the shelters falls on the municipality.
Yeah, another thing, Mr. Chairman, I know before coming back is how are we going to address residents that want to go east on a bus? Are they going to walk across the rough terrain and grass and then cross 38 where got people on bicycles barely make it? much less not carrying baggage, and wait for a bus. Where are they gonna wait for that bus to go back east?
Mr. Chairman, this is not a situation just for Beacon of Hope. This is for every commercial and office use that you have planned in your master plan and your zoning ordinance along Route 38. So it is not unique to Beacon of Hope. It is a condition for all of the development along Route 38.
I don't know what development he's speaking about.
The development are the stores and shops that exist along Route 38. The Wawa that's there, the,
And it doesn't generate bus traffic.
and there are stores and shops behind Wawa.
But,
So
yeah, but-
it's a region-wide condition, not unique to Beacon of Hope.
Right. But the only thing that's unique is when all of these other facilities were being proposed and put up in town, we didn't have foot traffic. We had parking lots for people to
You
drive.
do have
in.
foot traffic to them today. I live one town away, I drive Route 38 all the time, and I do see people walking along Route 38 to the various facilities that are along Route 38. It's not a heavy traveled by pedestrians, but it is traveled by pedestrians. As I said, it's not unique to the Beacon of Hope.
I mean, Mark, while you were the planner, if you, I don't necessarily think you would go for something like this, but now you're on this side telling us that it's okay.
No, that's not the case. Every application has to stand on its own merits, and that's why we're here before you in terms of this use variance.
That's why we're concerned about the foot traffic, so you're exactly right. So I think you need to address that if you come back.
I traveled that same 38 too.
It's not the responsibility of this applicant to adjust the foot traffic. It is a state facility, and if municipalities are concerned about foot traffic along their highways, they should do something about it. They can talk to New Jersey Transit, and they can talk to DOT. That's how it works. Not on the shoulders of one applicant.
You're saying two things at the same time, that every application has to stand on its own 2 feet, but yet it doesn't. So we're just asking, we just want to know what your plans are to address the foot traffic.
As I said, your master plan should address the foot traffic.
We did not zone churches in that area of town, but you said the master plan doesn't apply.
It's not just for churches. All of your commercial and office uses will generate pedestrian traffic. And that is how you're supposed to address your planning, master planning, and then you implement it through various ways to implement
That's
it.
why a church is not zoned for that spot.
Maybe.
You're gonna come back and you're going to address the traffic issue and the parking issue from what it sounds like. Is that the way it's going?
Well, the parking supply is sufficient, as what our testimony has been. If we need to come back and look at it in more detail, I think that's what we represented.
Let me ask if I could, what issues would the board like us to take an additional look at?
You want me to articulate some of them?
Sure.
Many as I have.
Okay.
I think the whole parking lot issue needs to be looked at, and the expansion of parking into the back. I don't know how that relates to the impervious cover, the tension between that and the impervious cover. But the issue is, do you improve the parking situation and grant a waiver for impervious cover? Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you get up to the edge and that's sufficient. So I think that needs to be of concern. The other issue, of course, with that is the trash out front. That's, in my view, that's ridiculous to put it there. I hear all the design arguments, and I do respect you, sir, but I don't agree with any of those design arguments. I think the other issue is whether you are willing to have conditions imposed, and I'm trying to find my notes. And this goes to the discussion that our planner had with the rate of growth of the operation. And whether, and I say this with deference to the planner, because he may correct me or supplement what I'm saying, but there might be conditions that limit expansion without coming back to this board for further approvals. So that
Understood.
if something, if business, to use that phrase loosely, skyrockets, that requires more than 9 to 1 on Friday morning to deliver food, or whatever, I use that as an example, that you'll come back to this board. It's almost as if there's an expansion of the non-conforming use, and you come back for permission to do that. Those are some of the things that I think I can think of right now.
Okay.
I suspect that our planner might have some thoughts. I suspect that other board members have some thoughts. But my point is that would it be a wise decision on your client's part to request an adjournment of this for the 30 days till the next hearing, assuming we can put it on. I don't know whether we can or not, but, and have those discussions with the planner.
Can we get some additional input from other board members? And then, I'm going to talk to my client about that. I'm going to recommend that we do that. I'm going to recommend that
I'm
we
only
do.
speaking for myself as a board member.
Understood. Can I ask for other input from board members? Is that fair?
Sure, everybody would be happy to, do you have anything you want to comment on?
I have a question in regards to the church portion of it. Do you have plans to allow weddings at the church?
That's a fair question.
Probably not. If it's a small wedding, we probably would, but most people that want to have larger weddings, they usually use like a banquet hall. Yeah, so if they did, it's more or less like just for the ceremony, and then they go to a banquet hall, or they use the banquet facility for the whole program.
Okay, because that does lead to my next question, because you have a commercial kitchen then, and then you have a fellowship hall, right?
Yes, the commercial kitchen is we provide hot meals for the Cold Shelter, yes.
Yes. So, I was asking because if you have plans to do that, or if someone would come and ask if they could, that goes to the church there. You do have a commercial kitchen so that they could get a professional chef, or you could get a catering company that could come in and they could do something like that at your facility. So then, because I'm asking that, it leads me back to the issue with the parking, just because if you have a wedding, unless what you said, it's very small, very small. But, if you have people that are coming, from distances, relatives, you've got single families or single people or whatnot, you're gonna run into an issue with your parking again. So that's why I asked about the wedding, because that's something else on the church side of it, that would create more parking issues than what the food pantry is. So that's more what I was thinking and wanting to know about.
I don't know if you want to.
We'll probably sit down and discuss with the couple who would be getting married and find out what size wedding that they were looking at. And if it's larger than what our facility would be able to provide, then we would, refer them to one of the local banquet halls. There's several of them. There's a couple in Hainesport, so, yeah.
We're not set up to be an event venue. That's not what we're
Right,
at.
correct.
That's not what we're aiming for.
Right, okay.
We're not.
Okay. So, and just something else just to think about too, if you would have weddings there, to decide if you're going to allow drinking there also, because then you've got an insurance issue as well. So that's just something to, think about as well. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that would be a no.
So that's good, I agree with you.
No weddings.
So.
No drinking.
Amen.
Thank you.
Any other board members care to respond to the counselor's request? I'll throw one thing in, that I'm a little disappointed in, I think this is in my opinion, a classic example of the cart before the horse. And what I'm specifically referring to, I had an opportunity to go to the website, and Beacon of Hope website, and I was looking at a whole bunch of information in there, and I was absolutely shocked when I saw a comment in there about, yay, we're moving. And there's a picture that's very similar to that down at the bottom. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot not to know what location they're talking about. I mean, and there's so many things that have to be considered, assessed, approved, and, I feel like, I'm just talking me, I feel like I'm getting pushed into something, and I push back. So, for whatever it's worth, I think we should think about a lot of things that we've talked about tonight. I am not happy with the parking situation. Now, I appreciate, and I'm not going against Mr. McKay's comment about the relocation of the trash thing, because that was, I think, and I compliment you for picking up on some of the comments that were made at the last meeting about the backing up of not only a fire truck, but the refuse and everything. And I think that there's some things that we have to work out between your professionals and our professionals, as Mr. McKay said. And I'm not being disrespectful to Pastor Trappier, but when Mr. McKay mentioned something about a delay, I saw your reaction, and it was like, oh, my God. I saw your head go down, and you put your hand on your forehead.
That's only because I have a grant contractual obligation. My grant for purchasing the property has a limitation on it, and
We're going to work that out.
Okay. No, I mean,
We're going to make that work.
I'm not being disrespectful when
I
I say
understand.
that's your problem. But
No, I understand.
But we have an obligation on the board to the residents of this township. And
I understand because I'm a resident of Hainesport as well.
I'm not running for office, by the way. I like what I do here. Thank you, though. But, that's,
We understand. When we'll work out the
areas of concern.
we're gonna, yes, we're gonna put our heads together and take an additional look at these issues that you've raised tonight, emphasized tonight, and we're gonna come back.
I have a question. Sorry. It was mentioned earlier
No.
that if we're past
Not till after.
COVID in this area.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
There's a microphone right next to you.
Right, we got a lot of,
It was mentioned earlier that this area, if we're past COVID, I think the pastor had mentioned that there's a possibility that you outgrow this. And where do you go from there? I mean, when this becomes too big, too little, I mean. Because that was brought up, it was a question that was asked, okay, pre-COVID or COVID, And all of a sudden, now we're back to normal again, and then this becomes something more than what this place could hold. What happens at that point?
I don't think we should, like, not approve or approve something based on a what-if. I mean, where I go to church, they built a building, and within the first month, they outgrew it. You know, so then they went to 2 services, 3, 4, 5 services. So, I mean, and then they started making plans to build another building, you know? So I don't think it's fair to approve or not approve something on a what-if. You know, I mean, they very well could outgrow this building, but if they do, then they're going to look for somewhere else to go because there's no room here to expand. You know, so, I mean, I don't think that's being fair to them by saying, what if they outgrow it?
Well,
I agree.
Well, I'm just talking about COVID. I mean, there's a lot, COVID happened, and it was there.
Right.
COVID's possibly behind us, and it could be there
COVID's gone.
before we even, you know, get
But you can't say
I don't
what
think
if.
it's fair to say if they outgrow it. It's what happens to the traffic and the surrounding area when they start on the road. I think it's the cause and effect of the outgrow.
Well, if you want to go that route, Wawa's going to close. So now you're not going to have all the traffic from Wawa, so potentially you're not going to have as many cars right there. I mean, really, if you want to go like that, so you can't,
Let me address your comment or question. I think the answer is we adapt.
yeah.
Like you do whenever conditions change. You adapt, you provide services differently. I mean, certainly, for our own purposes, we don't want to be in a situation where we are trying to do too much there. So probably what we would do is be looking to provide services differently. I mean, certainly our use of the site as proposed is, we're only using it for any given use, any given aspect of the use for a fraction of the week. You know, the food pantry provides services or is available to members of the community to pick up food on Fridays from 9 to 1. Yes, we do the deliveries on Thursday, but we're taking that food off-site to Mount Holly. But maybe then, as I think Mr. Remsa said, maybe if we provide food service two mornings a week to make sure that we don't have more vehicles than makes sense on a Friday morning, then we can accommodate on Friday morning. Maybe we start, one other way we might adapt by having a second facility in another location where we do a different, where we provide some aspect of our service. I mean, there's lots of ways that we can adapt. We certainly want to be in this facility, I mean, again, and I'm making a presumption here, but, assuming that we're fortunate enough to get an approval, we certainly want to use this facility responsibly, where we'd be members of the community. We will own the building at that point. We're residents of Hainesport Township now. We certainly want to be responsible members of the community. We're all about community. We certainly want to be in good standing with the township. And again, as someone pointed out, we can always be in a position where with conditions of approval, we're required to come back to this board at a certain point for additional approvals.
Ms. Edwards, did I understand you to say your client consents to a 30-day adjournment?
I'm recommending that we adjourn for 30 days. Pastor?
I'm just emotional right now.
Understood.
Only because of
Can I ask, Can I ask that we take can we take 5 minutes? And we'll make it only 5.
No, I can.
No, actually, I'd like to take 5 if we could.
Okay,
Okay.
Can I just have 5 minutes, just 2 minutes up here? I just want 2 minutes.
Okay.
This started for me at 19. 19 years old with a 5-week-old baby and a mother who was addicted to gambling, who took my welfare check and put me out. And I slept in the streets, in the bushes in Los Angeles for 3 nights, bathing my baby with baby wipes. So this is not a moneymaker thing for me. This is because I've been homeless, which is why I provide housing for homeless. I've been hungry, where my navel and my spine were starting to get to know each other. So that's why I give out food. Having to recycle my clothes, taking a dress and cutting off the dress part to make a shirt. Having my kids wear their clothes longer than they needed to, because I didn't have the money to provide for them. So what I do because I ask God, if you get me out of this situation and put me in a position, and I understand where you guys are coming from, that everything has to be, the I's have to be dotted and the T's have to be crossed. But I ask God, if you put me in a position where I can reduce people to not feel what I felt, to not have an address, to not have a connection, then that's what I said I would keep my word. And I said I would keep my word.
Quiet in the back, please.
I kept my word. And I'm only asking you guys to help me to continue to keep my word, to help others, because we're all just one lost income away from being in that position. That's all that I'm asking.
Don't turn around and,
Okay.
that's, you're making the mistake there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Talk to us up here.
But that's all I'm asking, is for the opportunity to do what I do here, because the space over there is 786 square feet. We've been doing it for 11 years. I need a bigger space to be able to, my basement is where I hold the toys at for kids for Christmas. My garage is where I keep clothes and hygiene kits and army cots. And this place gives me the opportunity to move it up all out of my house and put it in a place where I can sort it out and be able to help those who are in need. So we'll take 5 minutes, but I just felt like I needed to just share that with you guys. This is my heart. This is my passion. So thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you.
5 minutes and we'll be right back.
Got it.
Thank you.
By the way,
Two seconds. When you're gonna do, it looks like you're gonna be trying to move that park. You're gonna,
I go to Fellowship Alliance Chapel. Medford required them to buy 100 acres before they would let them build. 100 acres. So, well, yeah, it is now, but when they,
I would have
the
split her up
building that you
and
see,
score you.
first one, they
Oh,
outgrew
yeah,
it.
she probably wouldn't have.
Then they built the other one,
Lecture.
they outgrew that one too, you know, so they built the one they have now. So it'll be a while before they outgrow that one. They could technically see somebody's Where do you go?
Signed a, I think that's Sarah. 20 days. She'll do whatever.
You know, she lives in your development.
This is crazy.
I assume. Did, you heard,
Well,
but it,
you know, she's got to clean it up better. Maybe break up some, maybe it won't.
it's meaning.
And I didn't find their solution, but in my head,
He could have been
days,
a little more conciliatory. So, approach to it.
stacking people out. And that works in green banking for us. If we find, They could do some additional single-loaded dead-end parking back here. So I'll tell you the thing that blew me away today is none of it's quite adequate.
You know what? They didn't do a wetland. You got a wetland on
Building square footage? It's on the site plan. I didn't bring my magnifier. It's on the site plan.
There are,
I was worried about this.
Hey, don't go away with that.
She loves watching.
I don't miss the thing. Don't walk off with that.
People that have, we've got several issues with this thing. You know, we, it's part of our master plan.
Grandson is today. There's Northern. He makes
I didn't realize Wawa was closed. When did that come about? Yeah, when did, because they're opening the one down the road? Is that what they're doing? They're shifting to electric vehicles and they don't want
Yeah, that's how it's going.
Oh my God. You're so good.
My babies.
Maybe that Honda is that kind of thing.
Are they gonna put another gas station?
Go over here.
He's gonna create a Wawa type of building back there?
Quiet, please. I know you can hear me because I got the microphone on loud. Counselor, what have you decided?
We're going to take 30 days and do some thinking about and some additional calculations with regard to the issues that you raised tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to have this matter adjourned for 30 days until the next meeting, which is March
1st.
March 1st.
March 1st, yeah.
At 6:30 PM.
Is that?
So is that,
I know you can't.
is that notice to everyone here for the next meeting?
Mr. Malinowski, that works for you? Mr. Mosley, that works for you, March 1st? I understand that that's a problem. I think so.
That's my motion.
Okay, we have a second? I'll second it. Any questions on the motion?
The only question I have is for Paula. Paula, the ones that we keep saying they have to go to the next meeting, where do they fit in? The homeowners or that, A and C were put to the next meeting?
Well, we've taken it off, we dismissed it without prejudice.
Okay.
So that's not going back on the agenda.
Okay.
I will inform Mr. McAndrew in regards to what happened this evening and see if he chooses to wait until the following meeting or to come to be heard after them. If I do have a small residential case, as I explained to the attorney before, we have taken the little small residential case first, which they didn't have an issue with.
Okay, thank you. Then it was seconded, or I'll second it if it hasn't been seconded.
It was second.
Okay.
Okay. And on that subject, we will just encourage everybody to look at the agenda that gets posted for that meeting, and they'll know if anything's coming before it.
Yes.
Okay. Have a roll call on the motion in second, please.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Krollpfeifer?
Yes.
Mr. Nora Rita?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy? Yes. Mrs. Tyndale?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes. And may I just clarify that that's an adjournment with no further notice required?
Yes, that's what, I just said that.
I
We're
may
given the
have-
notice right now.
Got it.
Look at the agenda, and we just said it, so. Before everybody makes a rush for the door, I want to thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm sorry that it's another inconvenience, but I think it's a wise one. So otherwise, I wouldn't have seconded the motion and voted yes. So anyway, we'll see everybody on March 1st, and we're going to continue with our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Krollpfeifer, can you hold on for 1 second? I just want to see if Leila's still here.
If what?
I'm going to check and see if Leila's still here.
I don't think she
Okay.
Because she was there when I was back there last week.
I don't think she is.
Chris, we're not done.
My son just went through this weekend.
Yeah, I know we have the rest of the agenda we have to do. Sorry.
Oh, I go to Fellowship Alliance Chapel. If you go down 541 out of Lumberton towards Medford, it's right down there. You can't miss. You go to Fellowship Alliance Chapel. A lot of people call it FAC.
Got a couple of resolutions.
But if you go down there, when you get to where there's a Wawa and there's the oh, you just moved here. Are you looking for a church?
Well, I'm from Calvary Chapel, Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
My husband and I met there, married there.
Okay.
And then we moved to the city.
Okay.
So there was a BCA church there.
Okay.
And then next to
We left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, there's Calvary Chapel that's in Shelby.
Leaving during the
And
last.
so, and it's the same as like Calvary Chapel that's in Philly. So, and then Fellowship Alliance is it's a fundamental Christian church. So, we believe, that you need to be saved, go to heaven, the whole thing. So,
We saw her.
if you,
Yep.
do you know where the Lumberton is?
I thought we were going to get to it tonight.
You know where that is?
Not just.
Looking that way.
I have to go to the right, but
Okay, well, look it up online.
What's that?
Fellowship Alliance Chapel. So, and it's big.
No, hold on just one
Big,
second.
big, big. So. Oh, Bruce, yeah.
You can stay up here, we've got more business.
Holy cow. Oh, we have about 1,500, but we have 2 services on Sunday, 9 and 11. Yeah. Yeah.
What, I ain't one of your people?
Oh, wow. Wow.
Folks, can I ask you to please exit quietly? We have more business we have to attend to.
I have the same nephew.
Luckily, there was nothing in it.
Okay, the next item of business is the minutes of the November 2nd, 2022 meeting. I need a motion and a second that we accept the minutes.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes of the November 2nd meeting and file them.
I'll second that.
We have a second? Okay, thank you. Any questions on the motion? If not, roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Costco?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio? She's gone, okay.
She gone.
She's gone.
She go?
Yeah. Mr. Bradley? Mr. Novarita?
Yes.
Right, one of these things. Mr. Kroll Pfeiffer?
Yes. Next, we have Resolution 2023-4, granting bulk variances for construction. This is the property on Arc Road that we heard about, the chickens and bees and everything else. So I need a motion and a second on that.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions on the motion?
And second.
Why? I was here for that meeting.
I continued.
No, this was continued. This was voted at the last meeting.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
Oh, because I was saying, I remember listening to them.
All right,
Sorry.
oh, go ahead. You can't?
No, he can't. He didn't vote.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on the motion?
You have to have.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Costco?
Yes.
Mr. Kroll Pfeiffer?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
And Mr. Bradley?
Okay, we have correspondence.
I make a motion that we receive and file the correspondence.
Okay, any questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley? Yes. Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall?
Yes.
Ms. Costco?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy? Mr. Novarita? Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
And Mr. Kroll Pfeiffer?
Yes. Professional comments.
No, none for me.
Nothing, you're exhausted? Thank you for everything tonight. Board comments.
Me?
No, board, anybody. Yeah, you could say something.
Good to be back. Everybody's happy.
Okay. Public comments. Do we have anybody still on the phone that wants to make a comment about something?
There are 6 individuals online. I don't know if they want to comment.
Okay, for the folks online, unmute and speak up, please, if you have gone to public comments.
Nope.
Hearing none, we'll close the public comments and need a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good thing I went home, took care
Thank
of
you
my
for
dog.
everything, guys and gals.
Our dogs are at the office today.
Paula, Tiver?